And welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, which is being undertaken virtually in accordance with the intended enactment of government regulations during the current coronavirus pandemic. You've heard all of this before, so I'm going to whiz through it a bit quickly, but do bear all of this in mind. Can I remind all members that you mute your microphones when not speaking? You remain focused on the topic to be discussed. Please try to avoid repeating points that have already been made. This could be a very long meeting with 3 very important agenda items, so please bear that in mind. Please avoid interrupting other councillors and respect the position of the chair. At the beginning of each item, I will ask councillors who wish to speak on that item to indicate through the blue hand signals, primarily followed by physical hand raise on camera, and I will note them. As will the Democratic Services team, I will call councillors in the order in which I have listed them. The method of voting will be through roll call to ensure clarity. Members, I will remind you of this when we get later into the proceedings. Please remember that the meeting is being broadcast in the normal way via Facebook Live and that the public can hear what is being said and decided on and can see councillors as well. Please therefore take care to prevent any background distractions, and should you need to step away with these matters in mind, step away, switch off your camera and stop the video. With these matters in mind, can I call on Mark Devlin to do a roll call of all councillors and officers to ascertain who is in attendance?
Thank you, Chair. Could councillors please state you're present when I call your name, please? Councillor Morse.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bialik.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Branston. Councillor Branston. Oh, thank you. Councillor Foll.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Gussain.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaford.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Henson.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sparks.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Sutton.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Present.
Thank you very much. And we also have Councillors Atkinson, Jemima Moore, Vizard and Warwick in attendance, Chair. And if I could just do a roll call of officers in attendance as well. Director of City Development, Housing and Supporting People, Bindu Arjun.
Present.
Thank you. Assistant Service Lead of Planning, City Development, Roger Clotworthy.
Present.
Thank you. Principal Project Manager Development, Matt Diamond.
Present.
Thank you. Project Officer City Development, Jean Marshall.
Present.
Thank you. Principal Project Manager of Development, Paul Jeffrey. You there, Paul? I'll come back to Paul. Project Manager of Planning, Joran Molin. You there, Joran?
Present.
Oh, thank you. Principal Project Manager, Deborah Crowther.
Present.
Thank you very much. And we have in attendance myself, Howard Bassett as Democratic Services Officers, and Lloyd Oriel of Devon County Council Highways Officer. And could I just confirm, Paul Jeffrey, if you're there, please?
Present. Can you hear me, Mark?
Yes, got you. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
And I can confirm we are quorum chair to proceed with the meeting.
Thank you, Mark. The first item on the agenda this evening is apologies. Do we have any?
No, we have full attendance.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. The next item of business are the minutes of the planning meeting held on the 12th of October 2020. Are all members happy to approve these minutes in accordance as a correct record of the proceedings? This will be done by roll call by Mark Devlin.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just, if you're happy, we could do a show of hands vote, or if you prefer, can I have a show of hands, please? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, that is a unanimous vote, Chair. The minutes have been passed.
Brilliant, thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 3, declarations of interest. If any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests that relate to business on the agenda and have not already been included in the register of interest, to declare them before any discussion on this item takes place. The next item of business is the item 4, the Local Government Access to Information Act 1985 for the exclusion of the public and press. There are no items under part 2 on this agenda. And as first, I'd like to take us to item 5, which is Oldham's Farm West, Alphington. Oldham's Farm West, Alphington, Exeter, and Mr. Paul Jeffrey, you'll be presenting for us.
Thank you, Chair. Can you let me know if you can see my screen? Can you see it?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. Right, this is an outline planning application for up to 116 dwellings on a site to the east of Shillingford Road, north of Markham Lane, and south of Veitch Gardens and Royal Close. All matters are reserved except for access, which is proposed from Shillingford Road. The site forms part of the Exeter Southwest Strategic Housing allocated for up to 500 houses, which is part of a larger allocation for 2,500 across the Exeter and Teambridge districts. Members will recall recently in June 2020 approving the development by Redrow Homes on the opposite side of the road for up to 234 dwellings located between Chudley Road and Dawlish Road. The remainder of the Alphington strategic allocation is sited between the eastern edge of the application site and Chudley Road. No planning application has been submitted for this site as yet. Members may remember that this application was reported to Planning Committee in December 2018 at the same time as the site was being promoted now by Redrow Homes. I'll quickly run through the photographs just to set the context of the site and also show the particular sloping nature of the site from north to south. This is looking south along Shillingford Road. The tree proposed here, not proposed, existing here, is on the left-hand side, denotes the proximal position of the new access. Again, this is looking up Shillingford Road. Markham Lane can be seen just turning the corner there on the left-hand side. This is looking north along Shillingford Road towards Exeter. Again, the tree where the access is roughly shown is on the right-hand side. This is looking again south along Shillingford Road, further away. This is a view looking from into Markham Lane. This is looking from Markham Lane. This is along Markham Lane. On the left-hand side is Exeter district. On the right-hand side is Teambridge. So that denotes the boundary of the two districts. This is showing looking down from the Markham Lane junction. As I say, the access point for Shillingford Road is roughly in that location. This is looking from within the site. Beyond the hedge on this side is Shillingford Road, and the access is further down in this location. Veitch Close and Royal Close, Veitch Gardens and Royal Close are down in this location here. This is looking across the site. Again, you can denote the sort of sloping nature of the site in that location. And this is looking south along with Shillingford Road is on the right-hand side of the hedge. This is looking down across the site towards Marsh Barton, some of these white buildings in this location here. And this is looking, Markham Lane is on the right-hand side, again looking at the slope. So this is right at the top of the site. This is looking down towards the site towards Exeter. Okay, as stated in the application, this is an outline application, but they have provided an illustrative layout which proposes up to 116 dwellings. The layout plan shows the access onto Shillingford Road. It also shows open space alongside Veitch Close and Veitch Garden, and Royal Close. Retention of the hedge running through the site. Future access point into towards Chudley Road. It also shows pedestrian access through onto Markham Lane, which is to the south, and to the north here onto Veitch Gardens and Royal Close, and also indicates properties along facing onto Markham Lane in this location here. This is, as I say, this is only an illustrative plan, and given the need for a bus link through the site, which I'll talk about in a bit, it's unlikely this right-angled element within the site is going to be acceptable. However, the details as part of the Reserve Matters application will iron that out, and obviously this is not for consideration. This is just purely an illustrative plan. I must stress that. The next plan is just really some images that have been submitted with the application. This point here is where the access onto Shillingford Road. This is the open space next to Veitch Gardens and Royal Close, and this is the top onto Markham Lane. Again, just images provided by the developer. Obviously, they will change undoubtedly. Again, images of the open space and also within the site as well. The next few images are provided because Juliet Meadowcroft does want to speak against this application, and she's requested these, so I've actually provided them for her. The site is here. This red line denotes the kind of the strategic allocation for Southwest Exeter that includes the 2,500 houses that I was talking about. Again, another image shows the site, Exeter site in the top corner here, and the 500 houses. That was the red row site that I was talking about previously, and this is a site in this location roughly here. So these are really for the benefit of the speaker against, if she wants to refer to them. So in terms of like the report addresses each of the major subject areas in detail. So I'll not comment on every aspect of the scheme, but highlight particular areas which have raised most comment. The update sheet proposes changes to the requirements of the 106 agreement as requested by the county, and to reflect recent agreements completed in Teambridge in respect of timing of contributions. In addition, a condition is imposed specifically requiring details of how the through bus route will be achieved. As the report sets out, the principle of development is wholly appropriate on this site, which is allocated in the development plan as a strategic housing site. This will make a significant contribution towards the council's 5-year supply of housing, which, as members are aware, is currently deficient. The development will provide up to 116 dwellings, including potentially 35 affordable houses at a rate of 30%, which was recently accepted on the Red Road development site, which also lies within the Alphington strategic allocation. In addition, the scheme will provide significant contributions for both the wider southwest area and more locally in respect to bus services, public rail works within Alphington, improvements to the existing cycle links in Markham Lane, which are called with the Alphington Development Brief. The 106 agreement will also provide financial contributions towards education and GP surgeries, as well as ensuring the provision of district heating and provision and maintenance of public open space. Since members last considered this application, the developer has provided more detail and up-to-date information which has helped to address concerns that the scheme was not meeting the requirements of the Alphington Brief. It is now considered that the submission contains sufficient detail, which together with suitable conditions of 106 agreement requirements will result in an acceptable development. The Alphington Forum has raised concern about the lack of a through route from Shillingford Road to Chudley Road. As the report sets out, the land to the east of the application site is not within the developer's control. However, a combination of conditions of 106 agreement requirements will ensure that this route is safeguarded. In particular, a condition is proposed which limits the scale of development until a through route is provided. The Alphington Development Brief will still be an important material consideration when the adjacent site comes forward, and consequently the need for this through route suitable for buses will remain a requirement. Highway concerns raised in the report in respect of cycle and pedestrian accessibility and improvements to Markham Lane can be addressed with suitable conditions and a financial contribution. Accordingly, it is considered that the scheme as now submitted is acceptable and subject to a 106 agreement and planning conditions as stated in the report and the update sheet. The officer recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Paul. Do I have any planning committee members that have any questions for clarification?
Have Councillor Hannaford, then Councillor Bialik, Chair.
Okie dokie. Councillor Hannaford, you're first.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, Chair. Pressed the wrong button.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Last week at the Devon County Council Cabinet, the Exeter Strategic Transport Plan came up, and it didn't include the public bus services for the southwest of Exeter extension. And I proposed, and it was accepted, that we did actually put the new so-called A2 service in there. I'm still unsure, Chair, in terms of the presentation from Mr. Jeffries, whether or not he is satisfied that there's enough room and space within these outlying plans to make sure that this new development it can be served by public transport, because I'm sure that we all agree that it's absolutely essential that all of the southwest urban extension in Exeter is served well by public transport. Are we at a point where we can actually be sure that that is the case? Thank you, Chair.
If I can answer that, Councillor Morse. Yeah, Councillor Hannaford. Yes, I mean, one of the reasons this application has really been delayed coming to committee is to ensure that kind of the bus route, the bus provisions has been suitably addressed, and that has led to, as the report sets out, an increase in the width of the actual radius into the site. Also, a condition on the update sheet to make sure that the internal workings of the layout actually have a two-way bus travel. So yes, that is one of the fundamental concerns that the highway officer has been seeking to achieve, and yes, that's still very much on the cards. As you will see from the 106 agreement contributions, there's also a significant contribution towards bus services in the area. So I think the combination of 106 agreement contributions and also conditions means that that issue has been suitably addressed in our eyes.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bialik.
Thank you, Chair. We were looking at some photographs a few months ago, Paul, and I think it was Markham Lane, whereby we've got the hedgerow which is in Teambridge and the hedgerow which is in Exeter. Yeah. Now, I would say that lane has some value. Some people may not think it is. I think it's got a lot of value in relation to biodiversity and those sorts of issues. And I see from one of the plans or the indicative drawings there, it's the whole development is surrounded by hedgerows. So what are we saying? Will that hedge and those trees along there, if they are of value, of course, be all maintained? Because I would say that's quite an old lane and we would want to keep it. It would be good for, for walks and that sort of stuff around the city. We have a number of these. So I'm just interested on what our viewing position is about these hedgerows in relation to that. Paul.
Yeah, certainly, Councillor Bialik. Yeah, I mean, we agree in terms of like the development brief sets out very carefully and very clearly that Markham Lane is an important character to this area and should be maintained. As you may remember, there was at one time a situation where the bus route was going to go straight through this the lane, across the lane, which would meant that all that hedgerow would have been taken out completely. Now, luckily, the collaboration with Teambridge Council has meant the bus route will no longer go across that lane, and that will be preserved. We are looking to actually create gaps in that hedgerow for accessibility. So in all these cases, it's trying to kind of have a balance between keeping the biodiversity of that area, and we have included a biodiversity plan as a condition, and actually providing access for people to actually get from this site through to the community facilities and the school, which is to the south of this site. So clearly there needs to be direct routes in some instances, and as you'll see from the actual the illustrative plan, they are proposed to have a couple of routes, but they are pedestrian and cycle routes. They're not vehicle routes, so they should be minimized as much as possible. So I completely agree, it's a very important lane, and also, as you know, we've actually requested that some financial contribution towards that upgrade as is part of the 106 agreement. So yes, as much as that hedgerow should be preserved as possible.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Oh,
Councillor Sutton.
Thank you. Just coming back to the point about pedestrian and cycle access onto Markham Lane, which is to be welcomed. Will there be appropriate fencing, something to stop particularly youngsters kind of coming out at high speed from the development and onto the lane? And I'm mindful of the dreadful tragedy up at Pinho, where a young person on a bicycle kind of came out straight onto the road.
Yeah, Councillor Sutton, I think in terms of this is an outline application, and really what it does show is potential points where it comes out onto Markham Lane. And they do, from what I've seen in terms of the plans for the Vistry Homes development to the south of this site in Teambridge, they do sort of line up together. So there is kind of a symmetry to them. But the actual detail in terms of like barriers or whatever to actually slow pedestrians and cyclists down will come as part of the reserve matters application, and I'm sure my colleagues in highways, the county highway officer, will look very carefully at that. But yeah, it's an important point, and clearly we'll be looking to that in the future. Yeah,
thank you. I welcome that. I mean, obviously it's not a high speed road, but it doesn't need to be if your timing's wrong and you you coincide with the vehicle. But I welcome that. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Nope, doesn't look like it. In which case, I'd like to ask Councillors Atkinson and Warwick, who have requested to speak under Standing Order 44, each to speak in turn. I'd like to ask Councillor Atkinson to speak first and then followed by Councillor Warwick, being the order in which they requested to speak. As you know, you have no time limit for how long you can speak for, but this is a very busy agenda, so I would ask you to make your comments concise and to the point. Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for letting me speak. As was said, this application was deferred almost 2 years now because it failed to meet the Alphington brief, and I'm very pleased to see how much work has been done to make sure that it does meet the brief. In particular, I'm very pleased with the 30% affordable housing, and has just been said, the fact that the bus will not cross Markham Lane now, and that will be upgraded in a way which retains its character. And for Councillor Bialik, I think that lane was the route from the prison at the junction at Chudley Road to the gallows. So yes, it's obviously of historic importance. So I'm very pleased to do that we have had this success, and I thank the planners for discussing and collaborating on that. That there are still a couple of issues that remain of concern to the residents. And again, these have been mentioned, so I'll just pass them in brief. And that, of course, is the access onto Chudley Road. So I was very pleased to see at the last minute that a new condition 20 is being proposed in some way to meet Devon County Council's highways objections and the Alphington brief that there should be an exit onto Chudley Road, and that there is a limit of 75 houses until this access can be built. And it is of great concern, as I think is to the county highways as well, that 2 years later, no work has been done to talk to the owners of the other land to resolve this issue. The other thing that I would like to bring up that I'm a bit concerned with is I note, and I'm very pleased that there is going to be a footpath down Shillingford Road from the access down to the proposed new pedestrian crossing, which is, I think, just before Smithfield Road, or just after, I can't remember now. What I'm not clear about, and it doesn't specifically say this unless I've missed it in the conditions of the Section 106 agreement, who's going to pay for that footpath and the pedestrian crossing? Because I'm not aware that there is any money from the Housing Improvement Fund to pay for that. So where is this coming from? Is it coming from the developer, in which case it should be included in the Section 106 agreement? And there is a lot, while so much has been done, remains a lot to be done with both on the Teambridge side and the County Council and this developer and on the other side of Chudley Road to make sure that there is adequate pedestrian and access and points so that there is a through corridor for pedestrians to the city centre. Again, we want to make sure that the layout on both sides of the boundary makes that there is a priority for pedestrian and cycling access, so that cyclists and pedestrians are unimpeded, go through, and that the car isn't king. And I do thank Councillor Sutton for her mentioning, the crossing of Markham Lane with Chudley Road, because as residents may be aware, before lockdown, I was in the process of setting up a speed watch with the police along that section, because Chudley Road is, they speed down there. So we do need to make sure that the developments in this area on both sides do have traffic calming down Chudley Road as well as Shillingford Road to keep people safe, including people who may be crossing from one side of Markham Lane to the other side of Markham Lane. And this application is entirely silent on those. I know some objectors have said, well, we need a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit down Shillingford Road, and perhaps some, other traffic calming measures. And certainly, I mean, I think Chudley Road is already 30 miles an hour there, but they come down very fast from there. So we need to be very mindful about pedestrian safety going forward. So I hope these can be included in the Section 106 agreement. The other issue that was raised in this has been the concern of the Devon Wildlife Trust about the biodiversity of this particular site, and Councillor Bialik has already mentioned retaining the hedgerows to retain biodiversity, but they mentioned the fact that this site has bats and the need to have barriers down the hedgerows, so that I think they use hedgerows and trees as corridors on which to navigate with their sonar, and the light for some reason affects it. So we do need to have in place arrangements to safeguard the bats, and also breeding birds, dormice, reptiles that are hedgehogs and toads that are mentioned in there, so that there is a net gain for biodiversity, because again that was included in the Alphington brief, that would be important to facilitate. The last point that I want to make, before I move on to that, so I am pleased that it is going to be a condition to this application that there is going to have to be in place a biodiversity mitigation and enhancement plan, and I do hope that the Devon Wildlife Trust and other residents will be given notice of what's to be included in that before a planning permission is given. My last point is about the district heating scheme, because as you know, this again is in the Alphington brief, which says the site must be developed as a place which uses zero carbon energy and makes sufficient use of natural and local resources. Well, I mean, the plan is that this should be linked up to the energy from waste incinerator at Marsh Barton. And, what better opportunity than this site to have in place a district heating scheme for Exeter. So I was a bit dismayed to hear that the Section 106 agreement, whilst it will include an objective to have a district heating scheme, it is said to be subject to viability. Now, I'm concerned that there will be enough wriggle room for the developer to get out of providing district heating scheme, and we're so close in Alphington to the incinerator. I mean, it would just be a travesty if we had no district heating scheme, which will help Exeter meet its zero carbon targets, and it will bring cheap zero carbon energy to residents of that development. So my one suggestion would be, if at all possible, that we drop the viability and we say that it must be implemented as part of this planning permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Warwick, would you like to speak now?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I must admit, I love the photographs before. I don't know when you took those with no traffic on them, probably during the recent lockdown. I'll give you some statistics in a minute. Sorry. Alphington at the moment is going through a real change. I mean, I don't have to tell you that it's being ripped apart around us. And people are concerned. One of my constituents came to me quite recently and said that it was sad that the last field in Alphington will disappear. The last agricultural field in Alphington will disappear under these schemes, not this particular scheme, but part of the whole development on. And that makes people, I think, quite emotive. And when people are emotive, I think you still have to take them seriously because they do have concerns. And I do know that the people around here are really worried about some of the, particularly the traffic. And I know every time I come to this meeting, I talk about the traffic situation, but it is important to people around here. It's a shame that the photographs didn't go further down into Shillingford Road. That part of Shillingford Road where the entrance and exit to the new development will be is obviously the perfect place to have that because it's the widest part of Shillingford Road. It's wide because it was widened to build the road over the A30 when the A30 was built some years ago. But if you go down further into Shillingford Road, it isn't dual like this, it's single. And I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. And I think what those photographs do in some ways is give the impression that this is a quiet country lane, and it isn't. I today, as trying to get give some idea to the planning committee, and I understand that we can't deal with everything, but I'm trying to illustrate why people do have concerns. What I did was I stuck my camera on my windowsill. I live in Shillingford Road, so I'm obviously on the spot. I'm here. I stuck my camera for 30 minutes from 10 o'clock to 10:30, which, by the way, is supposed to be one of the quietest times of the day. 92 vehicles passed in that time. Now, I know I have friends from Devon Highway say, well, that's not a lot. But when you consider that's the quietest time of the day, it's winter, and we're in the middle of a lockdown, that's quite an amount of vehicles. And 52 vehicles went up and 40 went down. I did the same experiment again in the afternoon between the hours of 3:30 and 4 o'clock because I thought the school run, and 124 vehicles passed my house. What I did was I filmed it and then played the film back on my computer very fast and counted the cars as they and the lorries and the vans that went past. 56 vehicles went up the road and 35 vehicles came down that road. Now, it illustrates that this isn't a country lane. As I say, this is winter time, and we are in the middle of a pandemic where a lot of people at the moment aren't out as they usually are. I spoke to some guys doing some roadworks in Shillingford Road, and I said to them, and they said it's a steady flow. It's there, it's constant. They have to be extremely careful in what they're doing. As things stand at the moment, and I take on board and I very much welcome the fact that there's a safeguard. I read in the report and heard what Paul said. There's a safeguarding for the second entrance to this site onto Chudley Road, and I think that's imperative. That's absolutely important. Crossing on Shillingford Road, and Yvonne mentioned it before. It's vital. It's absolutely vital. That road is extremely dangerous. The postman tells me that when he walks up the far side of the road where there is no pavement, that he takes his life in his hand every time he does it. But what you've got to remember is until the second exit is built, entrance exit, whatever is built, then it's also the way that some pedestrians, not all, because according to proposals in the report, there will be other pedestrian ways in and out of the site. I accept that. But it is important because if people are going to the shop in Alphington or to the community centre or whatever, they will have to cross Shillingford Road. So that is vital that we get that crossing. I've mentioned before, there is no pavement. On the narrowest part of Shillingford Road, there is no pavement on one side of the road. There are 12 houses there that have driveways that come directly onto the highway. They come directly onto Shillingford Road, and it's extremely dangerous. There's some elderly people there who actually have to stand in the road and see each other out because of the speed of the traffic in that narrow part of Shillingford Road. Ironically, and I know that this isn't by design and there's nothing anybody, but that's the only two properties in the whole of Shillingford Road with young children actually live in that narrow part on that stretch where there is no pavement on that side of the road, and it is treacherous to cross or pull out. I've been talking to Devon County Council about traffic calming. And obviously a crossing would obviously contribute to traffic calming in Shillingford Road. What I think we need to remember is that Shillingford Road is the main road to the villages of Shillingford. It isn't a dead end. It's not some, when you hear of a road in Exeter, this isn't just Shillingford Road, and it is no cul-de-sac. It's a main road for the villages of Shillingford Abbot, Shillingford St George, Clapham Underdown, and tourist areas such as Holden Forest, the Anglin Centre, the Vineyards, the Treacle Mines at Dunchidiot. The caravan and camping site at Clapham Underdown, which generates a fair amount of caravan towing during the summer months. It's a tourist route as well. We also have a lot of agricultural vehicles, particularly at harvest time. At the moment, there's down great HGV wagons rolling up and down there with piled high with straw and bales of hay. At the last planning meeting, a senior member of the committee stated, people in Alphington need housing, so let's pass this. I think most of the people in Alphington do accept that. They recognise this. However, the changes to the area are many and substantial. So what I'm saying is, we still have to listen to their concerns. This Shillingford Road is a very dangerous road, and we really do need to look at that. I welcome very much the idea that the entrance will now be widened so that you can get two buses around there. I think that's, and I know the report deals with much of the other concerns I had last time I spoke to the committee, which is the linking up of the pedestrian and cycleways. And I understand from having read the report that a lot of that is now being dealt with. Obviously, this is only outline planning, so we can't get into any detail. Chair, I think I just wanted to emphasise the point about the bottom end of Shillingford Road, and I would like to hear from the planners about, maybe coming and meeting me as one of the local councillors and a person who lives in that road, because I think we need to do something about that before we increase the traffic numbers in Shillingford Road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Obviously, the highways matters are for Devon County Council to answer, and we are somewhat influenced by their decision, so that you probably need to have those conversations through Councillor Atkinson as your county councillor, I imagine. We do have good. We do have a member of the public wishing to speak. That's Juliet Meadowcroft, who is speaking against the application. You have 3 minutes to speak on the item, and you'll be advised when the 3 minutes are up. Are you ready, Mrs. Meadowcroft?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, away you go.
Right. Well, How many of you actually know this lovely country road, I wonder? You've just heard some of the concerns Alphington residents have over increased traffic on Shillingford Road once this development is built. But do you appreciate that there will also be another huge housing estate over twice as big as this one that will open above Alden's Farm East onto this dangerous hill? Many drivers ignore the unenforceable 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, ending up at speed at the double roundabout on Chudley Road, which is regularly congested with traffic from the A379, causing vehicles to back up almost as far as this development site. And this application doesn't even indicate the presence of the second exit that, according to Devon County Council's original indicative junction plans, should be onto Chudley Road. What people don't recognise is that at least half of the whole southwest development is north of the A379, and this means that there'll be approximately 1,300 houses here, in addition to this application, with at least 5 new accesses onto Chudley Road and 2 onto the twisty old Dawlish Road, exiting onto the lethal Devon Hotel roundabout. Why doesn't anyone look at the whole picture instead of approving each application separately? It's incredible that the Highways Authority declares that the development's traffic is unlikely to result in a severe impact on the safe and efficient operation of the strategic road network, and that the 2019 transport assessment claimed that the 2 village mini roundabouts are expected to operate within capacity. This is based on the Tempro tool that, even according to Devon County Council, does not consider the direct impact on the neighbouring development of 2,500 new houses. In addition to the huge concerns about extra traffic blocking the narrow roads in our conservation area, we're deeply disappointed that there'll be no new community facilities, apart from the local centre being built over a kilometre away, south of the A379. This means that the new residents will naturally try to come into our village, where there's no proper car park at the school, and surgery are already full. But I've said this hundreds of times, and we're just told that everyone will have to cycle or walk to the new local centre. Can you imagine that in this sort of weather? Or if you have very young or are very elderly? It appears that Barrington Estates have also ignored the fact that their development is part of a much bigger scheme, as they have not shown any details of links to surrounding residential areas or into the rest of the southwest development. Nor have they mentioned the fact that the historic Markham Lane bordering the south side is meant to be improved, according to our development brief, where it states that this should be made into a high-quality cycle and pedestrian route. It's essential that they contribute to these works, as this will be a main thoroughfare which, by the way, we managed to save from having buses crossing over the middle of it. At least our protests were heard for once by Teambridge, whose case officer agreed with us, as did Paul Jeffrey. We just hope that the Reserve Matters plans will show more sensitivity towards the residents.
Chair, 3 minutes are up now.
By changing the style and height of houses overlooking their bungalows in Royal Crescent, as they're totally out of character and do not reflect their
3 minutes are up.
The 3 minutes are up, I'm sorry. Very sorry, but if I don't stick to the rules at some point, I'm going to be
nearly finished.
Right, do any members of the committee have any questions for Mrs. Meadowcroft?
Is my camera not working?
No, I can't see you, I'm afraid. I can hear you though beautifully, which is the really important thing.
Oh, sorry, there it is. I found the place to open it. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Do we have any questions for Mrs. Meadowcroft?
I'm sorry.
See if we have any questions for you at all from any members of the committee. I can't see anybody.
No, I can't see any hands up, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Meadowcroft. If you like, you can sit back and sort of mute your computer and switch off your camera, and you can listen into the rest of the meeting.
Okay.
You've had your moment, so please don't interrupt.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, just before we move on to debate, I did wonder, we do have Devon County Council's Highways Officer here. I wondered if you'd be able to address any of the issues that have come up from Councillor Warwick and Mrs. Meadowcroft in relation to Shillingford Road. Is Lloyd there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Lloyd.
Hi all. Yes, I think there's a number of issues about Shillingford Road and its safety. I think I need to remind members that Paul's already said that this area has already been allocated as part of the South West Exeter Master Plan. We have taken everything in is as a whole. So the whole 2,500 dwelling allocation. So the allocation in Teambridge and the allocation in Exeter. And when we do that, it goes through our master plan and it goes through an access strategy to which number of 106 items and a number of mitigation measures are needed. And this application on its own has contributed towards those. I think there's been a lot of talk about speeding along Shillingford Road, and at the moment, yes, by looking at some of the pictures, it's just a green field. But when this does get built up and there will be a more sense of place and a more sense of frontage development, that in itself would be self-enforcing the speed limit. So the speeds that we show along Shillingford Road at the moment, people go those speeds because there is no frontage development. There is our traffic regulation or the policy to say that when there is appropriate levels of active frontage, that speeds will slow down. So when this development does get built out, I think those fears that have been raised will go away in the future. It should be noted that we have secured in the 106 a package towards Alphington Village works, and those would include potentially speed calming measures within the village itself, which in itself would help calm traffic down. We've talked about the link towards Chudley Road, and we've safeguarded the access for buses, and we've provided the pedestrian links to the north and south. So on that basis, it'd be hard to recommend refusal on what the application is before us.
Thank you very much, Lloyd, for that information. In that case, I would like to open the discussion to debate. Would anybody like to speak? No one?
Oh, Councillor Wright. Oh,
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Could I go back to a point that Councillor Bialik made and has been picked up a few times about the proposals to improve Markham Lane, or in the so page 44 of the report, it talks about the what should be done to improve Markham Lane, but it's saying that no proposals have actually been put forward by the developers. So I'm a little confused because they've been referred to a couple of times as if Markham Lane is going to be improved as a cycle route and a pedestrian route. But as I say, on page 44, it says that no plans have been put forward. So could that be clarified? Sorry, that should have been a question before the debate, shouldn't I? I've said it then, I've just realised.
It should be.
Chair, I'm happy to answer that if that's okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think in terms of Councillor Rice, I think in terms of that is a concern, and what you're referring to is the comments raised by the highway officer. Quite rightly, he's referring to the fact that there's no mention of Markham Lane improvements. However, that is something that was very clearly put in the development brief, the Alphington development brief. So I think that's why we're looking to kind of pick that up within the contributions towards within the financial contributions as part of the 106 agreement. So that will be a requirement of the development. Although it hasn't been mentioned by the developer specifically, it is something that is needed as part of this development. So it will be part of that 106 agreement contribution. And in a way, that's why the comments that Highways have raised in terms of, if you read the rest of their comments, they require further information. I think this is one of the things that they will be requiring, sort of confirmation there was going to be some improvements to Markham Lane. So that has been picked up, as was the improvements to accessibility through the site. So the two things that Highways were particularly concerned about, we picked those up in either 106 agreement contributions or within conditions. Hopefully that answers the question.
Did Councillor Wright, did you want to contribute to the debate yet, or question you had?
No, I'll listen further now. Thank you for my bad timing.
Councillor Bialik, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. People have been watching me. I haven't been deliberately fidgeting. I've been looking at these, or you can't see them, these documents, the core strategy, and also the Exeter local plan first review, which we all know we are going to be reviewing in the near future. I would like to, my first part of my contribution would be in relation to Councillor Atkinson's remarks about the district heating, which I totally support, by the way. It's all very well for us as a local authority to extol the virtues of these things and then not insist upon them. So what grounds have we got to assist? Well, I've looked at, and I feel sure Paul Jeffrey hopefully will put me right on all of this, CP 17, which talks about of the core strategy submission document 2011, which talks about the development of to the south of Alphington. And there's a number of things in which it requires it to do. And the last one is aim to utilise low carbon heat from the Marsh Barton Energy from Waste facility. So as far as I'm concerned, when we come up to it presently, Chair, I will be prepared to move that as a condition. Now, I feel sure there'll be some further discussions, and I feel sure we'll be threatened with viability with regard to affordable housing. However, I will leave that to the officers to negotiate away. So that's very important. I've also been looking at CP 19, which it refers to in the page 64 on strategic allocation sites. And I fully accept that this is a strategic allocated site, by the way. I fully accept that. But that doesn't mean to say we need to be blasé about it. And then I've been looking at the local plan in relation to page 111, item 11, landscape setting and nature conservation. And of course, there is references here again to Markham Lane and into this area. And I just want to be making sure that we are following our own strategies and our own plans. And for Councillor Warwick, I do see that on page 113, we have a duty to consult with the County Council over mining consultations in the areas. You made reference to the Treacle mines at Dunchidia earlier. So we will need to have those consultations. But on a serious note, I really do feel that we need to look at the landscape setting and nature conservation. Although from a political position, we've made it perfectly clear, I've made it perfectly clear, my position and in this position as a member of the planning committee in relation that we've made commitments to green and open spaces, which are usable at the end of the day, need to be usable, and make a contribution to the city chair. And we need to look at all of this in relation to, this is part of the strategic allocation, I get that, okay? But that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't take those concerns above on board, because we are, and it's not yet part of planning policy, I totally accept that. Under the government white paper, over the next 20 years, we are being asked if and they're going to change this algorithm to provide 12,700 homes. Well, with our livable Exeter vision, we have already said we will produce 12,000 homes over that self-same difference. So I do believe we need to get that plan sorted. And I know it's not in place at the moment, and we can't necessarily rely on it, but we would be foolish not to see that coming round the corner in when we are making these decisions. So I just wanted to bring attention to the CP17, and perhaps at the end, once people have spoken, Chair, you will allow me to move that further condition about the connection to the district heating. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I just comment on what Councillor Barlick has just said in terms of particularly, sorry, is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Go.
Yeah, sorry. In terms of Councillor Barlick's comments about district heating, I can say that even last week that Burringtons and Redrose were in discussion with our officers and with Teambridge officers regarding district heating. So I know that it is very much something in their minds that they need to do.
Good.
So it's not a case of they're trying to avoid it.
No.
I think we do have to be careful about actually making it a 100% requirement. They are, as I understand, and I wasn't involved with the meetings, but they are totally on board in terms of trying to provide that. What stage they got to, I can't possibly comment, but certainly, but the fact that they were sitting virtually in a room and talking about the issue about needing to connect into district heating is very much happened, even to extent it was last week. So I don't think they're trying to get out of this. I think we have to be careful about how that's worded to make it just a complete requirement. If it's not possible for technical reasons, then I think it'd be wrong to actually kind of like force that issue. However, we have got a condition in the conditions listed. We've also got a 106 agreement requirement. So we've got, it's all sort of two-headed in terms of trying to make sure that that is pinned down. And as I say, there is a commitment from the developer to do that, as there is from Redrow. And in relation to kind of the landscape setting, I think in terms of, yes, it is a strategic housing site. I think within that, as part of the reserve matters, we'll look at issues regarding the landscape, particularly in terms of the Markham Ridge, which is a bit more visible, making sure that that is like less dense and there is ability to see the ridge still, or still it's a lower level properties, and that has been commented in the report and will be certainly something we look at in detail as part of the application. And also in terms of nature conservation, clearly we've got the biodiversity mitigation and enhancement plan, which hopefully will cover a lot of the things that you've raised, and also Councillor Atkinson raised as well. So hopefully those conditions are trying to nail down as much as we possibly can.
Chair, can I just say in relation to that, I understand what Paul is saying, and if he can help us to word a suitable amendment to it, because naturally we trust the developers. We know we do, Paul. But let's perhaps have that little bit of surety, so Councillor Atkinson, myself and others can make sure that what we're doing with regard to the net heating is done. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I won't go on the more.
Completely understand, Councillor Barlick. We'll have a look at the condition again.
Thank you.
Okay, you two finished? Councillor Hussain?
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's a sort of a clarification and a question that always intrigued me, and Mrs. Medcroft have actually said that. Every time we look at a development in an area where we know it's going to be encompassing field after field after field, I always ask this question to myself. I know we're not supposed to. We consider every application individually, but I always think that this is daft when we know that all the fields around that bit is going to be developed. So why can't we take it all together, not as a development, but to ensure that, for example, transport, especially the bus routes and cycle lanes and all of these things, and amenities, all done and considered together. So the planning, yes, between one planner and another, they can consider the houses and the number of houses, and that's it. But for us to look at the whole area, so when a planner comes, they know that they have to have an integrated, they all have to integrate their plan to correspond with the required transport system, or the transport system that should be there. This piecemeal always approach always, make me, consider why is it like this? So maybe Paul and Lloyd can answer that. Why aren't we allowed to look at particular things, which is basic infrastructure as a totality, rather than piecemeal for every application on its own? Thank you, Chair.
I think in defence of Lloyd on that one, he did mention that earlier when I asked him to come back, and did say that there had been a strategic view as when it was designated in the strategy. But I'll let Paul and Lloyd replies I think is appropriate.
I'm happy to start. In terms of it would be great if we had everything in front of us to consider all at once, but it very rarely works that way, I'm afraid. Obviously, this is quite a big development. There's got lots of land ownerships, and to go back to the usual planning mantle that we always trot out, that each case has got to be judged on its individual merit. And that's what we have to do in terms of this application. But it has been considered as part of the bigger picture in terms of Southwest Exeter, which has considered kind of the 2,500 houses, appropriate open space, infrastructure and things of that nature. And obviously these things feed into a bigger picture, it's like a huge jigsaw puzzle in a way. So that's my comment. Lloyd, I'm not sure if you've got any further comments to make.
Yeah, I can only repeat what Paul has said. I mean, just to give you an example, as part of this 106, we've asked for pedestrian and cycle bridge works, which is actually in Team Bridge. So we are thinking about outside of the area, about, you know, where people are likely to walk and cycle, and we have asked for contributions towards Markham Lane, which is again on the boundary between Exeter and Team Bridge. So, you know, we are thinking about having an access strategy that buses run through this parcel, which then may run into an existing a forthcoming Team Bridge parcel. And we've already safeguarded a bus route through Alphington Farm East, which has already been granted approval. So, you know, there is that holistic approach to how pedestrians and cyclists will interact in each and every parcel. But at the same time, we need to look at this application on its own merits. And, you know, as Paul said, it's very, very hard to get everything to be done at once. But, you know, as part of the Southwest Exeter Master Plan, we have come up with an access strategy, and the applicant has contributed towards what we've required to make it happen, and it's acceptable in transport terms.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Paul. Anybody else wishing to speak?
Was that Councillor Harvey?
Not sure. He's not got his blue hand up, but I didn't see him. Did you want to speak, Councillor Harvey?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm interested. This concept of public transport and buses. Yeah. It's my understanding that bus services are currently provided commercially by private organisations. I don't know if anybody here has a crystal ball which tells me they're going to be renationalised in the future. I am well aware that there is a mechanism by which the county council and the city council can subsidise buses, but there's one thing putting in place highway infrastructure which allows for buses to travel through development or access development. But I think members need to be very clear that doesn't guarantee a service. Now, a Section 106 agreement can, and in this case does, provide for a certain length of time for a bus service. But beyond that length of time, when the authorities run out of money to fund a bus service, then it's entirely possible that the bus service should stop. And I think people need to be aware of that. The houses will be there for a long, long time, hundreds of years. The bus service isn't guaranteed to be there. Thank you.
Councillor Sutton?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to go over points that other people have made. This Southwest Exeter development has actually been under discussion for at least a decade, to my certain knowledge. And I do think it is relevant, the points that have been made about the strategic overview. That's pretty difficult when the entire development is in the control of one planning authority, and this one isn't. Almost all of this has already been said by Mrs. Meadowcroft and former speakers, is actually on the Team Bridge side of the border, and the comparatively small number of houses. I know it probably doesn't feel that way to Alphington residents, but it is comparatively small number of houses that are within the Exeter boundary, have actually been being discussed for many, many years, and they may not feel like it's been a success, but I hope they do think it's been successful. The Alphington Development Forum has worked really hard over many years to actually secure changes. And again, Mrs. Meadowcroft was correct in saying that they have had influence on that, including the success in not having buses going up and down Markham Lane. But this is allocated for housing, and we do need houses. Everybody is reluctant to see more development on the edge of the settlement where they live, and I get that, but there are hundreds of families on our council housing list, and there are even more young families living in overcrowded accommodation or sharing accommodation with other family members who need access to these houses, which are going to be people's homes. So I will be supporting this, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sutton. Did anyone else wish to speak?
Can't see any other hands up, Chair.
Okie dokie, in which case, should we? Oh, actually, Councillor Bialik, do you want to raise?
Yes, Chair. I just wanted to, I don't know if Paul has thought of any words which would get us to where we want to be, because without, I suppose we don't want to do we? You know,
I haven't yet actually, but but I'm more than happy to kind of agree them with the chair following the meeting and yourself if necessarily.
I'm happy with that. If the rest of it is on the basis that we want to get the district heating in. I'm happy to go along with that if the rest of the committee. I trust the chair to be able to do that.
I would support that, Chair, both the inclusion of that clause and the ability of the chair to agree it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If that's accepted, I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Hannaford was happy to second. Is that still the case, Councillor Hannaford?
I will if he's not, Councillor Moore.
It's whether he's being a bit slow, but one or the other of you have seconded it.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
Happy to second it, Chair. Sorry.
Councillor Hannaford. In this case, Mark, are we able to take a vote on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Could members please state if you're for, against or abstain when I call your name, please? Councillor Bialik.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Branston.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Fole.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Gassane.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaford.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Henson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you. Councillor Sparks.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Sutton.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Morse.
For.
Thank you. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
So then I'm assuming to approving the application with the amendment as agreed by me and me, really. In which case, can I get someone to propose the application, please? And the recommendation?
I will, Chair.
Yeah, I'll second. Sorry, Chair. I thought we'd done it. That was all. Yeah, I'll do that. Sorry.
No, we've just done your amendment. We haven't got.
Oh, right. Okay.
Substantive agenda item. In which
Thank you.
case, can I have another roll call, please, for the vote?
sorry, just to confirm, Chair, that was 12 votes to 1, and the that had been approved. So we can move forward to the final vote.
Thank you, Devin. Mark Devlin. Can we have a roll call on the final vote then, please? We've had that one proposed by Councillor Bialik and seconded by Councillor Sutton, or vice versa.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, can members state if they're for, against, or abstaining? Councillor Bialik, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Branston.
Councillor Branston, are you there?
Are you there, Councillor Branston?
Can you not hear me? For.
Oh, for. Thank you. Councillor Fole.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Gassane.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaford.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Henson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell?
Abstain.
Councillor Sparks?
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Sutton?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Wright?
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Morse?
For.
Well, thank you very much. So that should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 11 votes to 2, and the recommendations have been carried as amended, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. Moving on now to item number 6, which is land at Sidmouth Road, Exeter. Joran Molin will make the presentation, please.
It's going to be me, Roger Clotworthy, councillor.
In that case, Roger Clotworthy will make the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, just bear with me while I share my screen. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, so this is an application for an 18-metre 5G telecommunications mast. The site location is the red line in the centre of the plan here. I appreciate that's not very clear for you, so I've got some better images. This is the location of the mast is approximately in the centre of that red circle on your screen, which is situated in Sidmouth Road, just outside. You can see the Middlemore Police Headquarters, so the top right-hand corner of the screen, and the City Arms Public House in Ryden Lane to the bottom left corner of the screen. Another photograph is taken from Google Street View of the position of the mast, which is just beyond the bus stop sign that you can see at the back edge of the pavement, looking south along Sidmouth Road here. Again, a plan of the position of the mast and associated equipment cabinets, which are at the back edge of the pavement, where the pavement is at its full width. It does narrow a bit where the bus pull-in is, but this is the first part of the full width part to the south of the bus stop. The mast, this is an elevation of its appearance. It's 18 metres in height. We know that the highest tree behind it is 20 metres high. The application as it was originally submitted was for a 20-metre high mast, so roughly the same height as the tree. And it was also 1 metre slightly to the left of the position currently shown. It's been shifted due to the discovery of gas pipes underneath and reduced in height following discussions with our case officer about minimising the visual impact of the mast. This plan shows the cell search area that the applicant undertook. The green areas are areas that are already covered by 5G adequately. In Exeter, the red areas are areas where it's poor, and the areas where you can see straight through and there's no colour, where it's got little or no coverage. The green dot in the centre of the screen is where approximately where the proposed mast will be. It needed to be somewhere close to a pink dot, which I'm afraid you can barely see, but it's above the D in EDE 12840. There's a little dot, and they had to look something in approximately that area in order to provide the necessary coverage. In considering the appropriate site to use, they had a look at a number of other options, some of which are shown on the plan in front of you. Option 1 is the proposed location. The remainder of the options were discounted. There were a number of reasons for that, but primarily they were considering minimising visual impact, not conflicting with other masts where there could be potential conflicts in terms of the transmissions from each mast, and also they generally tend to first look on public highway land rather than private land, as it's easier to secure. There are a number of viewpoints, which I'm about to show you some photographs of montages showing images of the what the proposed mast will look like in situ. These are the areas they're taken from. These visuals were created when the proposal was for a 20-metre mast and haven't been modified. So as I said earlier, it was a 1 metre different location, and it was a 20-metre mast. Now what we're looking at is a slightly different position, very slightly, and an 18-metre mast. But I think that the visuals are perfectly acceptable in terms of giving you a good idea of what the visual impact might be, albeit that it will be slightly shorter than what you see. So you can see the mast there in the left-hand picture, looking down the road, down Sidmouth Road to the south, and on the right-hand side, looking in the opposite direction. So you can see its height in relation to the tree. As I say, it's now slightly shorter than that. And in the third picture, it's looking from across the road. And in the fourth picture, it's actually you can see it between the trees in the distance. And there is actually another mast in the foreground of the picture, which is owned and operated by a different mobile phone provider. Now, since we circulated an update sheet to members on Friday, but since then there have been a few more representations. So we now have 183 representations in total, of which 178 are objections. They broadly cover the same issues as have been previously described to members in the report, but there have been 1 or 2 additional points raised, which I'm about to go through. One issue raised is a question about why the site of an existing mast close to discounted option 3. So if we go back to this plan, there is a option 3, which was one of the sites that this applicant considered, which is on a piece of land to the north of the Exeter Arms, a tree and grass area adjacent to the highway on Ryden Lane. There is actually already a mast near there, and the person who wrote in asked why that site's not been utilised. It's understood that the reason for this is the mast, which is used by a different operator, needs to be further away to avoid interference with that mast's signals. A further question has been raised about the proximity of the top of the mast to bus passengers when the bus pulls into the bus stop and the consequent risk to health. As members know, we're unable to take health matters into account in making a recommendation on this application, but for clarity, a typical double-decker bus is around 4.5 metres high and the mast is 18 metres high. The distance between passengers and any mast emissions is therefore considerably more than the distance at which government guidelines say that any risk to human health would be caused. Concern has also been raised about the accuracy of the supporting visual material submitted by the applicant. As already explained, it's known that it is not entirely accurate because the position of the mast has been shifted by 1 metre and the height has been reduced by 2 metres since the montages were prepared. Nevertheless, the mast is next to trees with a known height of 20 metres, and therefore it is relatively easy to gauge the visual impact of an 18-metre mast in this location. Members will be aware that from the report that grounds for refusal of this prior approval notification are limited to sighting and appearance. There is not considered to be any justification for refusal of this application on these grounds, and therefore it's recommended that prior approval is required and is granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Roger. Do any members of the committee have any questions for Roger? I've got
Please, Chair.
Councillor Michael Mitchell and then Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Roger for clarification in relation to item 10 and item 12 in the report on pages 88 and 89 in regard to the national planning policy framework? There's no mention of paragraph 115. And if for the sake of members, I just read, it's not a lengthy paragraph. It just says applications for electronic communications development should be supported by the necessary evidence to justify the proposed development. This should include, this is the important paragraph, the outcomes of consultations with organisations with an interest in the proposed development, in particular with a relevant body where a mast is installed near a school or college. I'm given to understand that St Peter's School is approximately 100 metres from the proposed site of this mast. Were they formally consulted under paragraph 115A by the authority? If not, Does this have an impact on our decision making?
Yes, I can answer that. I think the school is about 200 metres from the application site, and I'm afraid I can't tell you for certain whether we sent a formal notification to the school. However, they did write to us, so we know they know about it, and we're given the opportunity to comment. When we did receive a letter from them seeking reassurance that any mast on the site would comply with government guidelines, which of course the report confirms that it does.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wright. Do you want to unmute, Laura?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, my question is also regarding St Peter's School. I've been written to by a resident who tells me that St Peter's School did write a letter in, which has been confirmed by you, Roger, but they were still, they had numerous questions and they were awaiting a response and they didn't get one. Can you confirm if that's right? So I want to know if their letter is treated as an objection or if it's not being treated as an objection and whether it's being responded to.
First of all, before Roger answers, if you make a representation, you are not opening discourse or a conversation, you're making a representation. So that's what they've done. They've effectively asked sort of a rhetorical question, but I would like let Roger answer the question as to why that has happened.
Thank you. Yes, the letter we received, which was quite short, asked for the council's assurance, as I said before, that there would be that it would comply with government guidelines. It was treated as a representation, along with all of the other 183 representations that we received, and we were unable to respond directly, as Councillor Moore said, to every representation we received. But we certainly have taken into account what they said. I think in their letter they did also ask for some extra time in case they wanted to comment further. But it was received on around the 20th of July, so I think they've had plenty of time to make further representations if they had wished to.
Thank you, Roger. I've got Councillor Harvey next.
Thank you. Roger, can you confirm for me that neither the mast or any of the associated cabinets actually need to be built on the pavement or cycle path there, that they are all in fact off both the cycle path and the pavement, please? Thank you.
No, if you look at the plan, they are actually on the pavement. They're on the back edge of the pavement. There is a gap of at least 3.475 metres between the cabinet and the curb, which we've had confirmation from the Highway Authority is sufficiently wide for the intended use, so it doesn't impede use by pedestrians or cyclists.
Okay, and Councillor Branston. Nearly there, Richard. No.
No.
Yeah, yes,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, my question was already being asked with regard to St. Peter's School. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Right, let's see where I've got to. I lost myself in the conversation. We have a member of the public speaking on this application. Can I ask Terry Wells, who is speaking against, or Terry Wells, who is speaking against the application, to speak? You have 3 minutes to speak on the item and you will be advised when the 3 minutes are up.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay.
Sidmouth Road is a major link between Exeter, the M5 and east of Exeter. The mature trees are a crucial aesthetic to this area and create an image of a green city. As there has been no environmental risk assessment, councillors, you may not be aware that according to a Devon Wildlife Trust survey of 2018, there are whiskered bats at Middlemore. These are a protected species in UK and Europe. 5G will not pass through wet foliage. Trees are being felled nationwide to allow this new technology, and any willful damage to this mature tree-lined road would impact aesthetically and totally alter the appearance of the locality. Peer-reviewed studies confirm RFR damage to trees. NPPF 2019, equipment should be sympathetically designed and camouflaged where appropriate. This 18-metre pole will be visible from some distance and be in direct line of sight for local residents, businesses, approach roads and loom high above bus stops. There is also the siting issue of the proliferation of masts in this area. Sited so close to a school with 2,000 pupils, which has had very little time to research and inform parents, etc., contravenes NPPF 2019, well-being for all sections of the community. This should include those who are electrosensitive. There is no evidence to show that local businesses have been consulted. There is no exclusion zone information mentioned regarding the close proximity of the school, local businesses and residential properties. The ICNIRP certificate is out of date, unsigned, incomplete and contains no technical info or ISO compliance. Therefore, how will the Council know the safety of this mast whilst it is installed, operational and maintained for the duration of the contract? Emissions from this mast may constitute a statutory nuisance caused by toxic pollutants harmful to human and environmental health. A statutory nuisance complaint has been lodged with the Council Environmental Health Department by Exeter residents to investigate whether polluting effects are permissible and whether the technology is sustainable. Thermal and non-thermal, cellular and biological effects of RFR, broadcast masts, base stations, are reported upon by Pierce, who argues the requirement for a precautionary approach to their siting on public health grounds, revealed by increasing evidence of injury, risk, harm and hazard. He agreed that telecoms could minimise liability, citing a review article of the health effects near base stations concluded that deployment of base stations should be kept as efficient as possible to minimise exposure of the public to RFR and should not be located less than 500 metres from the population and at a height of 50 metres. I urge the Council to reject this application on siting appearance and the incomplete, invalid information provided by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from members of the committee for Ms. Wells?
I can't see any hands raised, Chair.
Nope, I can't see any here either. So thank you very much. As with the previous speaker, if you'd like to mute yourself and switch off your camera, you can hang around and watch, but you've had your moment, so please don't interrupt any further. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Okay, before we move to the debate, I'm just going to remind you of some stuff that you should already know and you should have already received. Under national planning regulations for this type of telecom, prior approval, the Council can only consider its siting and appearance. Mobile operators do not need to justify the need for their apparatus. National planning policy says we cannot consider health implications associated with new telecoms. The Council cannot consider a perception of health risks or the precautionary principle, as the application's consideration relates to siting and appearance only. The considerations to be taken into account in the determination of prior approval applications are prescribed and are very limited under planning regulations. To consider matters outside of those required will put the Council at risk of high financial costs, and an unlawful decision is likely to be the result of a further approval. The application has to be determined by us within 56 days of receipt or a date agreed with the applicant. This operator has the right to install apparatus if we do not respond within those timescales. The Planning Department and Council has no control over what applications are submitted, nor can it withdraw the application. Only the applicant withdraw the application, and if the Council refuses to determine the application within the agreed timescales, planning permission will be given. So I want you to bear that in mind as members of this committee when we have this debate. If you enter into areas that are not planning areas, I will pull you up on that. Not because I have any specific opinion, but because that's all we are able to do. Councillor Bialik, you've got a hand up. Is that to speak or to comment?
To speak, Chair.
In which case, I will open the debate. Everybody put up their hands if they'd like to speak. Councillor Bialik.
Thank you. And thank you for that guidance and advice, Councillor Morse. I will follow it. It's just interesting what Terry Wells said. And oh, by the way, it's nice to see a person who emails me. It's quite nice. What she said in relation to the trees and the fact that they could be felled. Is that true? Could the officer tell me, is that correct? That they could end up being felled, whether they were perhaps a TPO'd or not? Is that true?
Roger, are you able to answer that?
There is no reason to believe that the trees will be felled. They're not within the ownership of the developer, the mast operator, and they wouldn't need to be in order to erect this equipment. I think they're on the they're either on the public highway, in which case they are under the control of Devon County Council, or they are in the under the control of the police headquarters. So in either case, the landowner potentially could choose to fell them if there was a particular reason for doing that. There certainly isn't any reason I'm aware of.
Thank you, Roger. Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Chairman. After what you've just said, one begins to wonder why we're here at all, to be perfectly honest. I often wondered about these masks, to be perfectly honest. I know over the years that I've been on planning, different masks at different times have been very controversial. But to be perfectly honest, we discussed the one at Carrick Street. Now, we turned that down on the fact that the people in Carrick Station might have problems with the people on the platform with waves of whatever.
Councillor Henson, yeah. That's not true. We turned it down for siting and massing in a conservation area.
The conservation area as well as, but no, that was what was in question.
With the train station.
Yes, I do.
Yes, it was nothing to do with the train station, Councillor Henson. They chose not to put it in a different siting because of the train station. It wasn't anything to do with our decision.
All right. Well, the other thing is that there has been some concerns, and I hear what Roger said about the school, but if you turned up the photograph that we had, you actually saw the corner of the play area of the school just opposite the pub there, on the inn on the side there. And to be perfectly honest, there it is. And I am concerned that the school has not come back forthwith with the amount of, in fact, the children that go within the area, and how many children pass that area to catch buses, which is very well used because it is a spur again to South Devon, East Devon, and different parts. And I haven't thought about double-decker buses until the person, Terry, was talking to me a while back. And I must admit, that didn't occur to me. But I do have some concerns where this is now. There is a huge amount with the people getting on and bus and the children using the buses on and off. Now, the other thing that is concerning me is also, I've just recently read some material coming up for what is required when people ask for mortgages and things like that. And let me, if I may, Chairman, please.
Councillor Henson, I've been really clear on what is a planning consideration on this case. Someone else's mortgage is not a planning consideration for us. The siting and the massing are the only decisions we can make. And you are deviating from the point. Now, if you can get that into a good point in the next 10 seconds, that's fine. If not, I'd like you to move on to a point that's relevant to the planning matters, whether you agree with them or not. It's what we're doing.
If siting is of property which might be by a pole, that is siting, and you can see it from your home, that is siting. And if that property loses value, and it's not to do with mortgage, it is to do with your home or anybody in that place. It's not just mortgage, it's property. And that is being cited.
Councillor Henson, the value of a home is not a planning consideration. I don't want to move on from you because you're not listening, but that isn't one. So do you want to move on to the next point, please?
I will move on to the fact that I have been having concerns. There is, if indeed people who live in and around here or anywhere, I have not always opposed because that is not my nature. But when there is schools involved, and when people are concerned when children are on buses, that is a concern for this committee. And I don't care how we look at it, what it is and what it is. We make the decision on what we can have within our siting. And if that siting, already a councillor has just mentioned the fact that the part of the pole is on a pavement or it's not very attractive anyway. But I must say that I am opposing this polling, as I'm not satisfied it is in the right place. I'm not at all against polls across the board, but I think we have to have and hear the concerns of the public that we represent. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Henson. I think we all hear the concerns. It's whether we have the planning abilities to make the decisions. Can I move on to Councillor Fole, who is the next to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I note that the previous application for St Thomas was overwhelmingly rejected, and not because of NIMBYism, but because people recognise that an effective 5G system would need a proliferation of masts between 15 and 18 metres across the city. So today, St Thomas, tomorrow, Sidmouth Road, next week, Topsham High Street, who knows? I'm not as eloquent as our leader, but I believe he wanted to turn it down in citing massing the last one because it was too big and too damn ugly. Now, I would argue that this one in Sidmouth fits the same bill. I could talk at length about the proximity to St Peter's School, which is 100 metres to the ground, but I won't. I could talk at length about the proximity to the police and fire station and the effect that has on fire station signals, so that 5G masts are currently banned in California because of the effect they have on fire stations, but I won't. And I could go on about bus stops being similar to rail stations, but I won't, because there's all sorts of reasons. But at the end of the day, statutory nuisance complaint has been lodged with Exeter City Council's Environmental Health Department. I think we should see the outcome of that. I think it's a great shame that St Peter's were not consulted. I understand they couldn't be responded to, but concerns they raised back in the summer, I'm surprised that they weren't asked to make a contribution and to consult. But I certainly cannot support this, and I think the incomplete evidence provided by the company in question and the issue of site and massing are good reasons why we might turn this down. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Michael Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I should have said Nicholas Parsons from your earlier interruption. I'll try not to deviate, Madam. Could I talk to the Planning Regulation 113, which is quoted in the report under Section 12, but only the last sentence of it is quoted. And I think following on from Councillor Foles, it makes sense. It says, the number of radio and electronic communications masts and the site for such installation should be kept to a minimum consistent with the needs of the consumer, the efficient operation of the network, etc. The use of existing buildings, masts, etc. should be encouraged. And my concern here, and it hasn't been mentioned in the report, and Councillor Foles indicated this, is in relation, we've got the main police force headquarters within less than 100 metres from the proposed mast. We've got the fire service there at the same time. And I'm concerned, have we got any evidence to prove that the 5G masts or the massing of masts in this area, besides the siting issue, cannot be a technical issue in regard to the public service operation in Exeter? And as Roger can reply to that.
Roger, would you like to reply?
Well, we did specifically consult the police because we were aware that they might want to make a comment on this particular issue, and they have not objected. They specifically came back, so they didn't wish to object.
Chair, as a point of information, California, as I mentioned earlier, have banned 5G masts from any of their fire stations because of ill health effects on its employees.
Councillor Fole.
With the
Councillor Fole.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fole, no, that's not acceptable. I asked you to stop and you continued. We are not in California. I am not bound by the same planning regulations as California, and they may have banned them, but we're not. So we're working with what we've got.
I did not hear you ask me to stop. I was simply raising a point of information, Chair.
Which you had already raised and which is not relevant to the planning matters I raised earlier. I'm very sorry that we are.
I choose to disagree. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry we're not able to have the debate that you want, but this is not the time or the place. We do not have the power to debate 5G in our planning meeting. We have the ability to discuss the planning matters. I really don't want to have to raise my voice and get cross with you all. So can we try and keep focused on what we can and can't do? Thank you. Right. Roger, you'd answered Councillor Mitchell's question, hadn't you?
Yes.
Thank you very much. In which case, I have Councillor Sutton next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to bring us back to Sidmouth Road, Exeter, if that's okay with the rest of you. I've listened carefully to the debate, and several of my fellow committee members seem to be kind of going off on remarkable tangents. You made it clear, Chair, the basis on which we can consider this application, and I read all the documentation that we've been provided with and listened to the presentations to inform my decision. And St Peter's School is 200 metres away from this, according to the information that I'm looking at. St Peter's School did engage with the process. They made representations. So to suggest that it's wrong that they weren't asked to engage, they managed to engage, they did engage. I cast my mind back to the early days of mobile phones. I've had a mobile phone since about year 2000, I think. And I can remember then that there were objections from various people about phone masts. But since then, almost everybody, and I strongly suspect that almost all the committee members own a mobile phone. I own a mobile phone, and I get a little frustrated when I go to places where there's poor coverage for mobile phones. And a consequence of having and using and needing a mobile phone is that we need to have masts in order to provide the coverage. It seems to me that this particular site is in a pretty good situation. It's on the outskirts of the city. It isn't particularly close to any residences. It's 3 times the height of a double-decker bus. It's adjacent to the police headquarters, and they have not seen fit to raise any objections. And I can see no reason not to support this, and I will be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Could I call Councillor Hussain, please?
Thank you, Chair. This question is for Roger, please. In that area, in the 150 square meter in that area, can you please tell me how many masts are there from different companies of mobile phones, please? How many masts in total? Because you said there was other masts from other providers.
The only one I'm aware of is the one on the piece of land adjacent to the Exeter Arms. I don't have any information about any others in the immediate area.
Right, so you're just saying to, the thing is, I will be abstaining. The reason why is because unless I have definite information about the cumulative signals from that area, because they, again, it's close to a school, unless I have, an estimation of the cumulative radiation from there, because of the proximity of the school to that, I will abstain from that. I will not support it. Thank you.
Councillor Hannaford.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to go back to the issue that was raised about the whiskered bat colony. And I'm not sure if we've had an answer from the officers in terms of the biodiversity issue and the fact that they're a protected species. This technology would obviously affect the bats' navigation system that they have and evolved with. So where would we stand, perhaps, legally, in terms of interfering with a protected species? Thank you.
Roger, are you able to help with that one?
Yeah, if I could refer you to the officer's report, and on page 96, just above the heading design, siting and appearance, there is a paragraph about the impact on insects and animals. And the advice from the government is that there is no threat to wildlife, no evidence of human-made EMF radiation at realistic field levels having impacts on animals and plants. So this is all we have, I'm afraid, but that wouldn't be a reason I would recommend that you use for refusal.
Thank you, Roger. And finally, Councillor Wright, I think.
Thank you, Chair. We all know this is a very emotive and difficult subject, and I would just like to thank Councillor Morse for keeping us on track with what we can and can't actually do within this committee. But I have concerns about the actual process here. We've got a statutory nuisance complaint which has just started, and I would prefer to be able to see the response to those very detailed points that are made in there before making up my mind on this. Also, the siting, we've talked about St Peter's School, but I am worried that we haven't had an assurance that they were consulted. I know that they put in a representation which had questions which weren't answered because it was dealt with as a representation, but I still don't know whether that was dealt with as a for or against. I think that the process should be that we are consulting with schools in the area. I know we've got then the discussion about, well, is St Peter's School 100 metres away? The grounds are, according to Google Maps, the grounds are. So the main building itself might be outside that. So it seems to me the siting of this, if you're going to actively consult the police station but haven't actively consulted with the school, I'm concerned about the process. So my feeling on this would be that I would put forward a suggestion to postpone it until that has been done with a proper consultation with the school, rather than just accepting a letter that they've written in. But also, I'm wondering where we stand when there's been a complaint put in, the statutory nuisance complaint about this. Are we able to make a decision tonight until the results of that complaint have been brought forward? So, sorry, that's a question, Chair.
Councillor Morse, do you want me to come in?
Yeah, I'm assuming that if we don't make a decision, the decision is that they've been given consent.
Correct. Unless we manage to persuade them to extend the time period for a decision, which I don't think they'd be willing to do, then automatically it'll be approved if it's not determined by this planning committee. And the other thing to say is that the statutory nuisance thing, which I'm unfamiliar with, is not it's not something that's administered by the planning service. And not part of the planning system. I'm afraid that you'd have to treat them as two completely separate operations. So it's not something that I don't think that would be a reason for deferring the application now. I've actually just been informed by one of my colleagues that we did formally consult the school back in July.
Thank you, Roger. That confirmation is very helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Right. Has everybody spoken who wanted to speak?
No other hands are up, Chair.
Brilliant. That's what I like to hear. In which case, as there are no further points, I would like to ask a member of the committee to move the recommendation and for a seconder?
I move.
And Councillor Williams and Councillor Sutton have put their hands up, so one will propose. I think that's Councillor Williams, and Councillor Sutton will second. Can we take this to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barlick, please.
4.
4. Thank you. Councillor Branston.
4.
4. Thank you. Councillor Fole.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Gassane.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaford.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
Abstain.
Councillor Henson.
Against.
Councillor Mitchell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Sparks.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Sutton.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Morse.
4.
Thank you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
6, 5.
2. That was 6 votes in favour. That's 5 votes against and 2 abstentions, Chair. So the recommendations have been carried.
Right, thank you very much. I'm just going to have a look at the time at the moment. It's 7:20. If we'd like to take a 5 minutes break so everyone can have a wee and get a glass of water, we will be back at, that would be 7:25, back here to see the final agenda item, if that's okay with everybody.
Well, thank you. Should be ready to go, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome back to the Planning Committee. Moving forward to item number 7, which is the ambulance station at Gladstone Road. Debbie Crowther is going to make the presentation. Over to you, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen with you all. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. So this is a full planning application for the ambulance station, Gladstone Road. The proposal is for redevelopment of the site to provide co-living accommodation. This is the site location plan. The site is approximately half a mile to the east of the city centre. To the east of the site, on the eastern side of Gladstone Road, is Waitrose and Heavytree Hospital. To the south of the site is the police station site and Heavytree Road. And on the southern side of Heavytree Road is St Luke's College. To the north of the site is Sanford Walk, with numbers 31 to 51 odd numbers being the closest properties to the site, and number 1 Gladstone Road. To the west of the site is St Matthew's Close. This is an aerial view of the site in relation to the city centre and shows where the bus station is to the west. This aerial view shows the existing buildings to be demolished on the site. You can see the police station buildings to the south and Sanford Walk properties to the north, and also St Matthew's Close to the west of the site. This is the ambulance station building viewed from Gladstone Road, and it's taken from the access to Waitrose. You can see the ash tree, which is subject to a tree preservation order, and over here you can see number 1 Gladstone Road, next to number 51 Sanford Walk. This is the existing access into the car park, and on the right hand side you can see the boundary of the site with Sanford Walk properties. This is a view of the building from the car park at the rear of the site. So all those buildings to be removed. And this shows the relationship with Sanford Walk properties and how close they are to the site. The property here is number 35 Sanford Walk. This photograph shows you the existing walkway at the rear of the Sanford Walk properties, and this is the existing boundary wall that varies in height along the boundary. So this is the rear of the ambulance station, and it shows the car park area and Sanford Walk properties. So these are numbers 31, 33, 35 and 37. And then looking in the opposite direction, viewed from the car park, looking across the ambulance station site, you can see the 5-storey building on the police station site to the south. So here are some photographs of the Sanford Walk properties. So the proposal is for a co-living residential development of 133 studios. 27 studios would be affordable rent, and that equates to 20%, which is in line with national planning practice guidance. The development would be car-free except for deliveries and drop-off pickup. The proposals include a new pedestrian crossing on Gladstone Road. The developer has agreed to provide a £65,000 contribution towards a pedestrian cycle crossing on Heavy Tree Road. It is accepted that there will be a reliance on existing public open spaces nearby to provide outdoor amenity and recreational space, and the proposals include a £50,000 contribution towards upgrade and maintenance of Belmont Park. The Section 106 will also secure habitat mitigation of just over £114,000, and the development is not still viable. This shows you the proposed ground floor layout. So the main part of the building is to the south of the site, and there's two wings to the north, one at the eastern end near Gladstone Road and one at the western end towards St Matthew's Close. The wings lie between 6 metres and 9 metres to the boundary wall to the north. A courtyard area will provide some outdoor amenity to the residents of the development, and there's a gated vehicular access shown from Gladstone Road, and from there people living in the development will be dropped off and picked up, and also there'll be access for deliveries. You can see the buildings are set well back from Gladstone Road, and that's to allow space for landscaping, and 3 trees are proposed to replace the ash tree, and no arboricultural objections are raised by the council's tree manager. The main entrance into the building is from Gladstone Road, and you can see on here the proposed pedestrian crossing on Gladstone Road. To the northwest of the site, a ramp is proposed, providing access from St Matthew's Close, and there's also a series of steps as well. And to the northwest, an area, that's where the bin store is proposed, where my cursor is, and also a covered cycle store. So this slide shows the communal areas on the ground floor in greater detail. So as well as the 17 studios on the ground floor, there's an entrance area with reception and post room. There's a workspace with seating area. There's a communal kitchen and a communal dining space. There's also a laundry facility. And over here, there's a games area and a flexible events and social space. Including the space on the lower ground floor, which will possibly be used as a gym, a total of 409 square metres of communal space is provided within the building. And as set out in the officer report, in the absence of local or national policy that sets out space standards for co-living developments, officers are of the view that the quality of amenity that will be provided within the co-living block will be acceptable. The accommodation will have a general manager and a team to support the general running of the scheme, and the management plan sets out that the site is likely to be staffed between the hours of 8 AM and 8 PM Monday to Friday, with key times covered over the weekend. As well as that, all tenants will have a contact number for out-of-hours emergencies. This is taken from the co-living design review document, and it shows the average size of each studio from, well, the average size of each studio from lower ground floor to third floor is 20 square metres. Each studio is proposed to be self-contained with a kitchenette, an ensuite shower room, a workspace and a wardrobe. So I did show you the ground floor communal facilities. Officers had sought for provision of communal areas on the upper floors of the building, in addition to the lower ground floor and the ground floor. But as set out in the officer report, the quality of amenity that will be provided is considered to be acceptable. In terms of the communal amenity space on the lower ground floor and ground floor, that will equate to 3.1 square metres per studio. So here are some CGIs of how the proposal will look. This is viewed from Gladstone Road. So accommodation is proposed over 6 floors, and that includes the lower ground floor accommodation and also accommodation within the roof space. The design is contemporary with grey coloured stunting seam roof cladding, buff brickwork and aluminium cladding. This is taken from the Heavy Tree Road junction. The application has been substantially revised twice, and the proposed building now features pitched roofs. This has resulted in the scale of the building being reduced and also an improved design. This is the elevation looking at the Gladstone Road elevation. The wings to the north of the building are much lower than the main building, and these wings contain 2 or 3 levels of accommodation. The report sets out on page 143 that the ridgeline of the proposed main building will be 6.9 metres higher than the Sanford Walk properties at the eastern end of the terrace. And that increase in height, it increases to 9.8 metres at the western end of the terrace. The red dashed line that's I'm just following with my cursor, that shows the outline of the previous flat roof proposal. And that was after the application's first major amendment, which removed the top story of accommodation. So you will see that the ridge height now proposed is higher than was previously proposed under the flat roof design. However, because of the pitched roof, the overall scale and massing of the building has been reduced. Officers consider that the pitch roof design is much more appropriate and sympathetic to the adjacent residential development. The elevational design fronting Gladstone Road will increase active frontages and contribute to the vibrancy of the area. So a CGI of that Gladstone Road elevation. And here is a CGI taken from further north on Gladstone Road, looking back south. This shows the proposed east elevation in the context of the wider street scene with the police station site to the south. And the report sets out how the police station site justifies a change in character between the Sanford Walk properties and Heavy Tree Road, and how a step up in height towards the south is considered to be appropriate by officers. This is the south elevation, and again we've got the red dashed line showing a comparison with the previous flat roof scheme. At the western end of the site, you can see the difference in height between the proposed building and St Matthew's Close, and also the proposed building and Sanford Walk properties. So the new ridge height will be at this end 9.7 metres higher than the ridge of St Matthew's Close. And whilst finely balanced, given the national and local guidance promoting the efficient use of land, officers consider that the height difference does not warrant refusal in urban design terms. A revised south elevation was received in response to comments from the council's placemaking officer, and this revised elevation indicates this recessed patterned brickwork panel at the western end of the building to visually break up that expanse of brickwork, so just where my cursor is here. These CGIs show the difference between the proposed scheme that is now and the previous flat roof scheme. This CGI shows a proposed scheme from the southern side of Heavy Tree Road. Members will note from the report that by reason of the distance separating the sites from heritage assets and as a result of intervening development, officers consider that the development will have a neutral impact on the setting of adjacent conservation areas and a neutral impact on the setting of St Luke's College. This photograph is looking from Sanford Walk at the western end of the site and looking towards the police station site in the distance. And over here is St Matthew's Close. And this is a CGI of how the developments will look at this end of the site. And we are looking at one of the northern wings to the building and the ramped access from St Matthew's Close. This shows a comparison with the previous scheme, so the flat roof scheme on the left and the proposed pitch roof scheme now on the right. So officers consider that the revised scheme is much simpler in its design, and you can see from this angle how the massing and scale of the building has been reduced by pitching the roof, the main roof. This is a CGI of the courtyard area, and you can see the ground floor accommodation with 3 floors of accommodation above. So this is the north elevation of the development, the elevation that will be facing the Sanford Walk properties. And this is taken from the design and access statement. Communal space windows are highlighted in yellow. The windows highlighted in blue are circulation space, and the windows highlighted in green are lighting studios. The update sheet sets out a number of recommended conditions, and condition 13 requires the windows of the corridor areas in the wings at first floor level, so that's this window here and this window here, to be obscure glazed. The condition also requires the windows of studios at second floor level and third floor level to be partially obscure glazed at low level. And I would like to add to that condition that the windows at second floor level lighting the amenity area and corridor area, so that's this window here and this window here, should also be obscure glazed. So in terms of privacy, the design and access statement shows how the majority of windows in the scheme will be a minimum of 22 metres from the rear of Sanford Walk properties. The Council's Residential Design Guide SPD states that a minimum of 22 metres is required between habitable room windows. However, in this scheme, the privacy is improved by the fact that the new building will not run totally parallel to the Sanford Walk properties. So you can see that this new building is offset a little to the Sanford Walk properties. The Residential Design SPD states that where buildings of different storey heights back onto one another, privacy distances will need to be increased. Given that there will be studio windows at second and third floor level, and the separation distances are not significantly greater than 22 metres, officers consider that it is reasonable to require the second floor and third floor studio windows to be partially obscure glazed to protect the privacy of neighbours on Sanford Walk. We have received a number of cross-sections through the development and Sanford Walk, and these have been useful in assessing the impact on outlook to those Sanford Walk properties. I will just go through this one section as an example. So this is the section at the eastern end of the site through number 49 Sanford Walk. The residential design SPD states that where habitable room windows face onto a blank or largely blank wall of another building, a minimum distance equal to twice the height of the blank wall measured from ground floor level to eaves must be provided between the two buildings. So here, this northern wing at the eastern end of the site, the eaves level is shown as being 3.98 metres, and the distance between the building and the Sanford Walk property is shown as being more than twice that distance, so it's shown as being 10.3 metres. However, height or to eaves level on the main building is shown here as being 10.17 metres, and the separation distance of 20 metres falls just short of being twice the eaves height. However, the outlook from Sanford Walk properties will not be onto blank elevations, and given the separation distances and having regard to the urban nature of the locality, the visual outlook for residents is considered by officers to be acceptable. Whilst we're on this slide and talking about the residential amenity of Sanford Walk properties, the findings of the daylight and sunlight report are considered in detail under the sections natural light and overshadowing, which are pages 154 and 155 of the report. And based on the results of the report and given the open context, officers consider the impact on natural light to surrounding properties will not be significantly adversely affected, and it is not considered that the impact on overshadowing to properties would warrant refusal of the scheme. This shows the west elevation of the development. So this will look onto the blank gable wall of one of the blocks on St Matthew's Close. Blocks 5 and 6, which are separated, which look onto this elevation, are separated by a much greater distance, and the separation distance there is between 36 and 37 metres. So this slide just summarises how no technical objections to the proposals have been received from consultees. And you will see all the consultation responses in full on the council's website, but the consultation responses have been summarised in the officer report. So in conclusion, officers consider that the development is acceptable for these reasons. The proposal makes effective use of a previously developed site. The site is in a sustainable and accessible location close to the city centre. The principle of a specialist housing development in this location is acceptable in principle. The development will help the council towards providing a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, and this build to rent housing development will provide 20% affordable private rent, and the affordable housing will be prioritised for essential local workers. The development will improve pedestrian crossing facilities on Gladstone Road and also make a contribution towards improving pedestrian and cycling crossing facilities at the Gladstone Road and Heavy Tree Road junction. The design and visual impact is considered to be acceptable. The quality of amenity provided within the development is considered by officers to be acceptable. And taking into account the urban context of the site, the impacts on the amenity of surrounding properties are within acceptable limits. There is a detailed recommendation on the update sheet. However, we are required to obtain written agreement to the pre-commencement conditions from the applicant. And I have been in discussion with the applicant, and we have received comments on the conditions from the developer, and officers are in the process of checking these with relevant officers and consultees. Therefore, we would like to amend the recommendation in order to seek delegated authority to amend the conditions to address these comments as required in agreement with the chair. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Are there any questions for Debbie, members? Oh, I've got loads. Goodness. Can I start with Councillor Harvey, please?
Yeah, just a very quick question, Debbie. I didn't quite spot it on your sheet, but have you consulted with the waste people as to whether or not the size of the bin store is going to be able to cope with our new waste regime as from whenever we bring it in?
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. So that answer is contained on the update sheet. So the council's waste collections team commented that the number of bins required for local authority collection was actually greater than is shown on the plans. So they'd asked for 7 times 1,100 litre of refuge bins and a 1 times by 240 litre refuse bin, and the same number for recycling bins. And they commented that anything less than that would be under capacity and extra paid for collections would be needed. They also commented that ideally the refuge lorry would be as near to the bin store as possible, with the distance that bins have to be moved minimal and preferably direct. And in response to those comments, the applicant has confirmed that the bin store will have capacity for 9 1,100 litre bins, and waste collection for the scheme will be undertaken by private contractors.
Debbie, Councillor Michael Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Debbie, 2 questions based upon the slide you've shown. One is in relation, I think, to about number 18. I was trying to quickly get the numbers. It's in regard where you showed the police station, the existing building of the police station, and the level of the proposed building. And you made the statement, I believe, that the height of this building was reasonable in light of the police station building in front of it. My concern is that it is highly likely the police station site will be redeveloped in future years. By agreeing to the size of this particular development, do we therefore mean that we've taken away any chance of lowering the height of any buildings in future that might appear on the police station site, or are going to be stuck with blocks like this at the same height or higher on the immediately on Heavy Road facing what is a quite attractive site of St Luke's College, whereas in fact the police station at the moment sits in harmony to some extent at the lower level with St Luke's. And I'm just worried about the domination, the statement that this building sits alongside the police station, and if once the police station's gone, will that new building, if agreed, set the standard for everything else that can be built in future? So that's the first question. The second was on slide 27, and it's just, again, this problem of developers supplying us with photographs or CD, whatever you call them, images. It does seem to me that we've got a 2-story building next to Waitrose with existing student accommodation, and the proposed new building is shown at approximately the same height, which is not, doesn't seem realistic to me. And do you accept the validity of that photograph?
Okay. So this slide here shows the Sanford Walk properties,
Yep.
the proposed development,
Yep.
and the police station site. Yep. Yes, I think the police station site will in future come forward for development. It's unfortunate that both sites aren't being looked at together, but obviously we've got to determine each application on its own merits, and this site has come forward first. In urban design terms, I think the scale and massing of this building does sit in well with the adjacent development when you consider the wider context. And I think as a local authority, when the police station site comes forward, we will be looking to achieve the greatest density of the development on that site as possible, taking into consideration all the other material planning considerations and residential amenity and urban design. So yeah, I can't say what's going to come forward on that police station site, but we will have to look at it on its own merits when that comes forward.
But in effect, whatever is agreed on the existing site could have an influence on what goes on any proposed site on the police station.
Yes, it will be. If members go with the officer recommendation, then obviously this decision will be a material planning consideration in the determination of any future planning application on the adjacent site.
And slide 27, I think it is, if you could. No, it's the next one, I think. Sorry, 28. 27, I got the number up, yeah. It just looks, as I say, strange. We've got a 2-story building, and this 4 or 5-story building, not that far away, looking lower than the 2-story building.
I think that's just the perspective of it, because it is set well back from Heavy Tree Road, whereas this property is much, it's much closer. So I haven't spotted anything that makes me suspect that the CGIs aren't correct.
It just seems, in relation to the Waitrose building at the side again, which is only a 1-story building, it does seem somewhat lower than I was expecting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just to reinforce what Debbie has just said, we can only decide the application that is in front of us, not a hypothetical application that may come forward. I'm sure it will, but that's not for our consideration. We can only consider this one in these planning terms and that one in that one. I would agree with Debbie. It's a shame we haven't got them both together, to be honest. Moving forward, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to come back to the bin storage situation. Deborah, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. You indicated that there was a ramped access to St Matthew's Close, and in the original document, the report, it was planned for local authority to be collecting bins, and I was concerned about these very large bins having to be wheeled down this ramp. So now that you've actually got the revised proposal where they're going to have private contractors, is the plan still to be wheeling these very large bins down that ramp for collection, or are they going to be accessing it from within the development?
As far as I'm aware, it's still going to be from St Matthew's Close and using the ramp to the bin store.
So I've got two related questions to that. So is that going to be an open access so that it could be used by pedestrians to come in and out of the site? So are there any safety implications there?
Pedestrians, only residents of the development will be accessing the sites using the ramp or the stairs.
So, so they're locked access then?
Yes, there are going to be gates. It is a gated access.
Okay, thank you. And it was just on the update sheet where you said that the private contractors, they said now that they will have a bin store with capacity for 9 1,100 litre bins. So, but that's sort of smaller than the total of the green and the refuse bins, because it was 7 times 111 plus the smaller ones, and again the same capacity for recycling. But now they're saying they're going to have only 9, whereas before we had 14 plus 2 little ones.
Yeah, so the 14 plus 2 little ones would be the requirement from the council's waste disposal service. So the developers will need to have more regular bin disposal service.
So will they be having recycling?
Yes,
Because it
there will
doesn't-
still be recycling.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I've got Councillor Hannaford next, but Councillor Henson, I have seen you. You can pop your hand down.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to explore the definition of essential local workers. Obviously, one of the things that's become very much reinforced during the pandemic is how essential retail workers are, and particularly food retailers workers. So can I just sort of seek an assurance or get some information that will the affordable element of this development, it also include retail food workers? Obviously, it's next to a major supermarket in the city, but it's also within short walking distance of the city centre. And I just think if we want to keep on reinforcing sort of carbon neutral lifestyles, I think we'd be really missing out on a trick if this didn't include food retail workers in the mix. Thank you, Chair.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Hannaford. Debbie, is there anything we can add to that?
I'm just trying to quickly look at the definition in the National Planning Policy Framework. But
Yeah, if I move
yeah,
on.
so I might come back to you.
See if you can get back to me on that one. Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Chairman. When we look at the map here at Glens and Gladstone Road there, you are prepared to put a crossing just near that junction there to White Rose, by which case, if you're coming out of White Rose, it's a hell of a problem when you're looking right, because that's right on that bend, and the cars whip round there. So I'm a bit concerned how much on the corner that is on Gladstone. But my other concern is it has been mentioned about light and the light area, but surely there is something in the planning, national planning, that there is an element of expectance of certain amount of sun who it cannot be blocked out. It's not only just light and airspace, but there is a certain amount when we've got blocks like that the sun can get to these buildings which have been there for the turn of the last century. And I think which is north, which is south, then that would have been a bit more helpful if we, it would help me to understand if indeed this was not in the dark or starved of sun over parts of the day. And I think it's so important, particularly on Sanford Walk on the left-hand side, particularly those on the right wouldn't affect, but those that is backing straight onto it, that's one of the things I'm concerned about.
Are you able to answer the questions on light and the crossing, I think was the other question.
The crossing on the right on that corner of the stores right opposite. That's right on that bend.
Okay.
Okay, so the position of the pedestrian crossing has been agreed with Devon County Council Highways Authority, so they're keen for that crossing to be in that position, and that's where they consider the crossing is necessary. Let me just try and find a photograph. I wouldn't be so concerned about vehicles coming out of the Waitrose access because they will be travelling slowly. So I don't see that there is danger of vehicles travelling fast in that location. The proposal does include a refuge area for pedestrians as they are crossing the road, so that does make the pedestrian crossing safer as well. And there is a planning condition that requires the details of that access and particularly the width of the pedestrian refuge in the middle to be agreed with the local planning authority in consultation with the highway authority. In terms of sunlight, the developers have submitted a very detailed sunlight and daylight assessment, and the report does contain quite a lot of detail about the findings of that report. And so that's contained really on pages 154, 155 of the report, and officers are satisfied that the development is acceptable in those respects, given the urban context of the site.
Thank you, Debbie. I don't think there's anybody else.
Councillor Branston, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Branston, sorry, I didn't see you there.
That's okay, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep, thank you. Debbie, you made reference right at the beginning of the distance of the application to the nearest property, which is one in Sanford Walk. One of the residents of Sanford Walk stated that it was actually only 17 metres from the rear elevation, which is contrary to the planning residential design relating to privacy, which states a minimum back-to-back distance of 20/22 metres between rooms and the windows. Could you clarify that point for me, please?
So with the windows looking onto these properties, the distance from the main building, I had shown from the design and access statements that this distance is either very close to or in excess of 22 metres. And then in the wings at first floor level, there are windows lighting the corridor areas, which will be obscure glazed, which will minimise the impact on privacy. So there won't be any windows directly looking into one another where that are less than 22 metres. I can go back to the design and access part that shows you those distances.
I think we're probably right. If you can get that up on the screen, that would be great.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
So yes, the wings here, the northern wings, so that's at the western end and the eastern end, you can see there that the distance is less than 22 metres. But then when we look at that elevation, these windows highlighted in blue at first floor level are proposed to be obscure glazed. So that counters the loss of privacy.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. Is that all you wanted to ask?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's all right, thank you. If everyone has asked their questions, no one else wishes to ask anymore. We have two councillors speaking under standing orders. That's Councillor Jemima Moore and Councillor Vizard. They are speaking under standing order 44 and they may each speak in turn. I'm going to ask Councillor Moore to speak first because she submitted a request first, and then Councillor Vizard. As we mentioned earlier in the day, earlier in the meeting, you do have infinite amounts of time to speak, but we really rather ask that you keep it to the point and relevant to the committee, as it's already been quite a long meeting, and we, it should be relevant and it should be planning considerations. Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Newtown Primary School's tagline is a village school in the heart of the city, and this feeling of being a close community, a village as it were, is very much true of Newtown, despite its central city location. The temporary nature of this adult-only accommodation will fail to serve the housing needs of our community and sadly will not provide affordable family homes, which are much needed, especially at a time when our primary school is facing dwindling numbers. While I'm pleased that this development would be car-free and I'm keen to see this brownfield site used for much needed housing, the proposed development is overbearing and would put a strain on our local outdoor spaces and be detrimental to the area's biodiversity. What a shame that an application hasn't been put forward for this entire site. If the ambulance station site were to be developed alongside the police station, we could potentially have a much more pleasant and in-keeping development with greater outside space for residents. As it is, the building is too large for the site, meaning that the on-site outdoor space is insufficient and residents will be almost entirely reliant on our community parks and green spaces. I don't believe that the suggested Section 106 payment will be sufficient to cover the additional demands put on our parks. The suggestion is that this money will be spent on enhanced lighting provision, fencing repairs and improvements to our adult gym. Anyone who's spent time in Belmont Park recently will know that it's extremely well used. And while having money to spend on resources is great, the additional demands of 133 extra people using the park will mainly be on the space, which cannot be fixed by a one-off payment. As a slight aside, a recent survey by Exeter City Living found that not only did the majority of people vote against the option of lighting in the park, but many commented against it, citing concerns about the impact on wildlife and the environment. Natural England comments that this development falls within the zone of influence for the ex-estuary and is likely to have a significant effect on the special protection area due to the increased recreational pressure caused by the development. They state that permission must not be granted for this application until mitigation measures to prevent these harmful effects are secured. It is not yet clear from the report what these mitigation measures will be, and I hope that members will seek clarification. This development would also mean the loss of a mature ash tree, which is much loved and a prominent aspect of Gladstone Road. While the Exeter City Council tree manager gives no arboricultural objections, an inspection contracted for the developers by Advanced Arboriculture suggests that the tree is suffering from ash dieback disease. I feel that an independent assessment or an assessment looking specifically at ash dieback by Exeter City Council would be appropriate given the tree's TPO status. Even if the tree does have ash dieback, the recommendations from the Devon Ash Dieback Forum are that live infected ash trees are not felled unless for public safety. It gives evidence that a small proportion of trees will be able to tolerate the disease and recover. Disease-resistant trees could be the source of our future ash trees. While the developers plan to replace this tree, the replacements will be considerably smaller and will not give the same ecological benefit or be as prominent to the streetscape as they will be drawn back from the road. As well as negatively impacting the local area in terms of strain on our outdoor spaces and biodiversity, this development is also going to severely impact local residents on Sanford Walk and St Matthew's Close. It would introduce additional height and massing, not in keeping with the character of the Victorian properties on Sanford Walk, and is not sympathetic to the local character of the conservation area. It will block light and generally overshadow neighbouring properties. Sanford Walk residents at number 33 will fail to meet wind sunlight requirements. The development should be judged in comparison to the other residential dwellings, not the police station. Those living in St Matthew's Close flats will be looking out to a large expanse of brickwork, and I do not believe that the suggested pattern brickwork panel would adequately improve the impact of this. As well as having concerns about the impact of this development on existing residents, I'm also concerned about the well-being of the future residents of this property. Without any local or national guidance, co-living is very much experimental and feels to me as a way to make maximum profit by squeezing residents into housing which doesn't conform to the national space standards. Of course, we can conjure utopian visions of happy co-living communities, but how can developers possibly know that residents will be like-minded? I wonder how sharing a communal living space with such a large number of other people will work in reality and can envisage a lot of potential difficulties. With all of the communal spaces being located on the ground floor, I wonder how accessible they will be to those on the third or fourth floors. While there are no planning guidelines on COVID, it would seem irresponsible to accept this application without a consideration of the impacts of a lockdown on residents of this type of development. Would they create a bubble of 133, or more likely be confined to tiny, inadequately furnished living quarters with no outdoor space and in some cases obscure glazed windows? If permitted, this overbearing development will have a negative impact on the local area, putting pressure on our local green spaces. It will dwarf the homes of local residents, blocking light and impacting on their privacy. It will fail to efficiently use the existing brownfield site on the footprint of the ambulance and police station, and would also fail to provide the affordable family homes much needed for the community of Newtown. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Vizard, if you'd like to make your statement.
Thank you. Good evening. And I realise it's been a long meeting and people are tired, but if you can stay with us for this bit, it is a very, very important application, this. So thank you in advance for listening. The ambulance station site is in the heart of the Newtown community and represents the first step of what is likely to be a very significant development of the Heavy Road corridor over the coming years. Nobody opposes development of this site. What we in the Newtown community ask of you this evening is that you hear our serious concerns about the application in front of you and consider very carefully whether this is a suitable and sustainable development of this site and not a quick fix in the form of a towering and oppressive block. I acknowledge, of course, that you must judge this application on its own merits, not on what alternative options might be considered for this site. However, it is worth noting, as others have already done, that at this point, what is a missed opportunity, what a missed opportunity this proposal as it stands, and if it is approved, would represent. This is a huge development of 133 bedroom units, visually uninspiring, with no garden provision and offering only a very minimal external area. Instead of enhancing the Newtown neighbourhood, which is an innovative and successful example of post-war town planning, this proposal would impose upon the community an overbearing, ill-fitting, skyline-changing building. I want to talk briefly about co-living. Your report states the size of the majority of rooms in the proposed co-living scheme fall below the national space standard for a one-bed, one-person dwelling of 37 square metres. The room sizes of the studios vary between 18 and 42 square metres. I note, as Councillor Moore has done, that the communal amenity areas are located on the ground floor. Does this provision really compensate for these exceptionally small room sizes? I accept that co-living may provide one solution to our housing crisis, but I do have concerns. What will this project look like in 10, 15, 20 years' time? Will people still want to live in a hotel room size pod, or has COVID changed people's expectations of shared living, and in particular the need for outside space? We have established that there is a deficit of national and local guidance for this type of accommodation. And in the light of this, I hope that members will think very carefully about the appropriateness of this development. Turning to the 20% provision of affordable homes, the officer report states there is no national planning guidance at present or a local policy that specifically deals with this type of housing. This council's excellent high watermark policy stipulates 35%. The officer report points to national guidance on these types of developments in mitigation for a lower offer, but this council should be pushing for better. You may argue that this type of housing is by its nature affordable, but affordable for who? Of course, we want to attract young professionals to come to the city and for graduates to stay here, but this application offers only a one-dimensional approach to a much more complex issue and will upset this community in the process. Turning to the scale and massing of the building, the officer report states the main part of the new building will be much taller than the adjacent buildings on Sanford Walk and St Matthew's Close. However, the police station site justifies a change in character between the Sanford Walk properties and Heavy Road in terms of a scale of townscape. I find this a surprising statement. People don't live in the police station, which is hardly a high bar of visual amenity and is going to be pulled down anyway. And as Councillor Mitchell has rightly noted and highlighted, the potential of setting a precedent here out of this sort of scale should be considered. Directly across the road, you have St Luke's campus and its important heritage and a locally listed main building. Planning should aspire to the best and most appropriate local standards. People do live in Sanford Walk and St Matthew's Close. This application simply doesn't aspire to these standards. The report actively states, or perhaps that should be understates, that the development is not fully sympathetic to local character. Exeter City Council's placemaking officer says there is potentially an uncomfortable height relationship between the proposed building and the existing flats of numbers 7 to 8 St Matthew's Close. And the report accepts that the juxtaposition between the buildings of lower height on Sanford Walk and St Matthew's Close and the proposed development of significantly greater height remains uncomfortable. This is not only unwelcome and unacceptable in terms of being overbearing, but it is also acknowledged that it would result in a reduction in daylight and sky visibility, and it will increase overlooking and impair privacy. The ridge height of the main part of the building would be more than twice that of the terraced houses on Sanford Walk, and yet it fails to meet the minimum distance away. Residents have also rightly raised concerns about increased noise disturbance and antisocial behaviour. And with this in mind, I want to highlight the police comments about the need for a staff and security presence within the building 24/7. The application states there will be 8 AM to 8 PM on-site management with an out-of-hours emergency number. The police have requested a condition with respect to 24/7 on-site management of the development to be maintained indefinitely, and the vetting of potential tenants. The report accepts that there is a lack of outdoor amenity space and that the proposed courtyard area on the northern side of the building will not adequately cater for the needs of the occupiers of 133 studios. Therefore, it is expected that residents will use the public open spaces within their vicinity. Natural England have also drawn attention to this increased recreational pressure. This goes to the heart of the issues around the impact on the community that Councillor Jemima Moore has talked about in more detail. The impact of this development will be permanent. A contribution to public open spaces, while always welcome, is finite and largely cosmetic. The effect of dropping 133 new living units and people into this community without any substantive additional outside space is to create 133 fresh demands on the existing community resources. Natural England say the proposal should be reviewed in light of the government's commitment towards the delivery of biodiversity net gain. Yes, there is some tree and minimal shrub planting, and I question where the biodiversity net gain is here. New developments need to do better than this. This doesn't represent the garden city we aspire to be. There have been 128 objections to this application, with only 2 in support. And yet, since the initial public consultation event held at a nearby hotel, which must be well over a year ago now, I'm not aware of any contact that the developer has made to residents to offer to meet on site, to review, discuss, or try to address their issues. This council has demonstrated an innovative and sustainable approach to solving the housing need in Exeter with its Garden City and Vision 2040 plans. I applaud this, and I ask members to consider this application with this in mind, to ensure a consistent message is sent to the community about suitable housing, first-class design, sustainability, and a positive contribution to the environment and to our commitment to make Exeter carbon neutral by 2030. So for the reasons I've outlined, I don't think this application meets these standards, and I would ask you to refuse it this evening. If the committee is minded to support some form of co-living development on this site, I would ask you to defer approval in order for the developer to reconsult with the Newtown community and address the issues of scale, design, and amenity significantly, as the applicant for the Clifton Hill site has done, and come back with a revised, higher quality, lower rise, and preferably more mixed development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Vizard. Can I now, we have 2 members of the public speaking on the application. Can I ask Dr. Matthew Lockyer, who is speaking against the application, to speak? You have 3 minutes to speak on the item, and you will be advised when the 3 minutes are up. Thank you.
Okay. There is no appetite for a co-living development in this area. People are concerned about the potential for noise nuisance and late-night antisocial behaviour, the height and scale of the building, and the preservation of the ash tree on Gladstone Road. The St Luke's building is an important heritage building, and its vista is subject to planning conditions. The proposed 6-storey building is out of keeping with the rest of the buildings in this area, and the police tower should not be used as a precedent. It is set back a considerable distance from residential properties and has no significant impact on light levels, privacy, and overshadowing. The proposed building height violates policy DG1F and DG1G outlined in the planning committee report and does not relate well to the adjoining buildings. The co-living aspect of this development is in name only. People will not want to live in a building with 80% student occupancy. The average size of a dwelling falls considerably below residential amenity, and there will be no parking allowed for residents of this building. Thus, as affordable co-living, this development is woefully inadequate. The developer's daylight and sunlight report is also fairly damning. It clearly states that 15% of the windows of Sanford Walk properties affected will suffer daylight distribution reductions of up to 47%. And 21% of the properties will not meet BRE guidance for sky visibility. The gardens of some properties will at worst receive less than 2 hours of sunlight per day due to overshadowing. 50% of the properties affected will be below shadowing guidelines. This is wholly unacceptable and cannot be justified on any level, even though the report attempts to do so. Windows of the development will also look directly into gardens, lower floor and upper floor windows, and severely affect residents' privacy. The residential design guide states a minimum back-to-back distance should exceed 22 meters for buildings of different heights. The development report clearly states this condition is not met. At the top of Sanford Walk, the distance is a mere 10.5 meters. The ash tree on Gladstone Road has a TPO order, and the fate of this ash tree relies on visual inspection from a contractor employed by the developers. A full independent report should be commissioned. It can be argued that there is none of the main visual evidence of dieback, just poor management. Devon Ash dieback organisations state do not fell live infected ash trees. There is evidence a small proportion of these trees will recover. Whilst we realise that refusing the planning permission for this oppressive, inappropriate and inadequate development is not easy, it's the right thing to do for the people of Newtown and St Leonard's. The planning officers or the officers who have deemed the light level reductions to be acceptable most certainly do not live on Sanford Walk.
Have you muted yourself, Mr. Lockyer, or are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
We're done. Thank you very much, Mr. Lockyer. Would you be happy to take questions from any of the committee if they have them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would anybody like to ask a question, Mr. Lockyer? Not anybody with their hands up, Mr. Lockyer? No, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks very much.
If you want to mute yourself and hide in the background, I'm more than happy to have you there. Okay, we also have Mr. Leston John, who is speaking in support of the application. Again, you have 3 minutes and you'll be informed when your time is up.
Thank you, Chair. Committee, I hope you can all hear me okay. This scheme is a very carefully designed proposal, which is the culmination of a very extensive design process and of lengthy discussions with officers and stakeholders. This is a much needed development, which if approved will deliver considerable benefits to the city. It will help to meet the acute need for housing, which is accessible to young people and key workers. It's vital to maintaining the jobs and skills which Exeter needs. The site is perfectly suited to accommodating a co-living use. It's a brownfield site occupied by vacant, poor quality buildings in a highly sustainable location with many facilities in the immediate area and with the city centre only a quarter of a mile away. It is vital that the site's potential is fully realised. In so doing, this will reduce the pressure for housing to come forward in less suitable, less sustainable locations. Our clients welcome the support which officers give to this scheme and their acknowledgement to the efforts which have been made to adjust the scheme in response to feedback. Not unreasonably, considerable attention has been paid to the scheme's relationship with the adjoining houses. Again, we welcome officers' conclusions that the scheme does not have a harmful relationship in relation to privacy, overlooking and sun daylight. These conclusions are the result of a forensic and robust examination of the issue and are wholly appropriate to the central urban context. I'll refer you again to the facts as set out in the officer's report. We note and welcome that in their assessment of design quality, officers' conclusion that the scheme is in broad conformity with the local plan policy on design. However, we are a bit puzzled that it is suggested in the report that the scheme does not conform with the two elements of this policy, namely those concerning the relationship with adjoining buildings. I would ask you to note that the scheme complies overwhelmingly with the requirements of the much newer Exeter Design Guide, which sets out various provisions specifically intended to ensure the new residential schemes have a proper relationship with their surroundings. This is acknowledged by officers in their report, e.g. under Outlook. This relationship is, in my view, not uncomfortable, but it's wholly satisfactory, as both the analysis from the design guide and the scheme's visualisations demonstrate. The site is within a zone of transition between the more traditional housing to the east and the more modern and commercial character of Heavy Tree Road, and we would suggest that it is therefore of an appropriate design. Our final observations relate to officers' suggestion that communal living space be provided on the upper floors. As long-established providers of multiple occupancy developments in the UK, Watkin Jones understand the needs of their residents. The amount of communal space within the scheme is wholly acceptable and actually larger than recently approved in co-living schemes recently approved elsewhere in the city and beyond. This scheme represents a well-designed or well-located proposal which will provide much-needed housing to the city centre and aligns closely with Council's objectives to deliver more sustainable development. It will also provide a much-needed injection of capital to the NHS. We therefore hope that you will concur with the officer's recommendation and grant permission so that Watkin Jones can move forward quickly and deliver this development and meet the city's needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you be happy to receive questions as well?
Yes, of course, of course.
In which case, Councillor Mitchell, you've got your hand up.
Myself, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to develop with you some more statements about co-living, so we can actually, because this is only the second application we've had in relation to co-living, and in planning terms, it is still rather a vague concept. In the literature you sent to us as councillors, the following statement appears. Graduates in particular often find themselves unable to find suitable accommodation in the city and have to move elsewhere. This means Exeter is losing talented and highly skilled young people. The lack of affordable, high quality accommodation is a reason for this loss. Could you tell me what independent research this statement is based on?
As part of the submission, we provided a detailed report done by Development Economics, who are specialists in this sort of and related sorts of housing. And that looked at the particular economic, labour market, job type characteristics of Exeter and drew on evidence set out by the City Council themselves, but also drew on sort of reference sources from across the UK. And in making the observations that my client has done, they are drawing on evidence that has been set out and responding to particular issues, which I think are, in our view, are pretty well known about Exeter and having a problem hanging on to its quite often highly skilled young people.
But are you able to put a sort of ballpark number on what the current situation is, the need we've got to try to meet?
Yeah, not immediately, because it's a detailed, complex area. That material has been submitted in quite a lot of detail to the City Council as part of the application. And obviously, you'll appreciate I don't have it to hand.
Right.
I think the top line is the need is acute. There's no doubt about it.
Right. Let's move on to another point. In regard to the previous development that we discussed, we had some discussions about tenancy arrangements.
Yeah.
Are you able to supply us with an indication of what the length of tenancy will be for people residing in this property? And will it be a different tenancy arrangement for those in the affordable accommodation and those not in the affordable accommodation?
As a general point, it's going to be a minimum tenure of 3 months, and that's something we've agreed with your officers.
12 weeks.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
So that's the same as a previous application from another site that we considered at the last month. Then same. Theirs was 12 weeks as well. Yeah.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. That's correct. Right. Reference the tenure period for the key worker element. Yeah. I don't have an answer. I would imagine it's the minimum. It's the same.
All right, thanks. One area that we didn't discuss at the last minute, I don't want to break into confidentiality here, but can you give some indication of the type of cost a tenant would have in a property like this on a weekly basis?
Forgive me, I don't have that information.
So, Councillor Mitchell, I'm not sure it's entirely relevant to the planning application.
All right. Will any of the accommodation that is planned here be expected to be tenanted by undergraduates or postgraduates in full-time education, especially bearing in the proximity to 3 institutions, St Luke's, RD&E, and the medical school? So are you assuming that a large proportion of your customers will come from that basis rather than young people in the town?
No, we're not assuming anything. What we do know is there's a demand from a wide range of people. So that could include students, it could include postgraduates. It's very likely to include a lot of young professionals, because that is what Watkin Jones have identified as being a key requirement. The city knows that. So basically, anybody who's able to pay for the accommodation and stay there for 3 months, it will be considered by the developer.
So in effect, except for the affordable section, all of the remaining rooms could go to one particular section of the community or another section of the community.
Correct. There's no particular target. It's the breadth of market is there.
Right. Last question: how does the accommodation and facilities that are currently planned differ from those you would offer at a purpose-built student accommodation? What's the significant difference between this and student accommodation?
Okay, so this is 100% studio accommodation, whereas I think other purpose-built student housing could be a mix of studio and a mix of cluster bedrooms and so on and so forth. That's one differential. And then in terms of the communal space, it's much more substantial because you've got a much increased emphasis on communal living, and obviously there is that in purpose-built student housing anyway. But you've got large areas of workspace, breakout space. You've got games areas. You've got communal dining, communal kitchens, and so on. And so it's a lot more and more diverse in character.
Thank you for those responses. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else wish to ask any questions?
Not seeing any other hand. Oh no, sorry, Councillor Wright. Sorry.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I've missed this, and somebody's asked it, but I haven't noticed. The space, the room space goes up to 28 square metres for the top floor apartments. Is that right?
Yes.
Is there any stipulation that any of these apartments will be leased just to single people, or are you expecting that couples might be able to lease the larger flats?
Possibly. There's no stipulation as far that I've come across in my discussions with the developer about who occupies what. Ultimately, it might be couples or it might be single people, and they may be on whatever floor.
Okay, so it could be a couple in one of the bigger ones. I'm just thinking about the floor space, which won't surprise anybody. So it could be two people in one of those 28 square metre top floors, possibly. Right, thank you.
That's all the questions that we have. Thank you very much for coming and speaking to us.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay in the background if you wish to. In which case, that opens the application to debate. Anybody who wishes to speak, can you raise your hand, whether it's a blue one or a real one for me, please? Got Councillor Branston and then Councillor Henson so far.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
We can. Go ahead, Councillor Branston.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'll try not to repeat what the ward councillors have already said. We don't want repetition, obviously. But what I would like to say is that over the past 10 years, there's been considerable number of large student developments in Newtown, which were built mainly near the city centre, away from the residents, mainly, of course, as we know, in Western Way, Bamford Road, Bamford Street and Parish Street. This application is completely different. It is in the very heart of the residential area. 27 elderly residents live in our council flats in St Matthew's Close, and the residents in Sanford Walk are also extremely close proximity to this site. Without doubt, this is the most controversial application in Newtown since the Waitrose application. I will be voting against this application on the following grounds. The proposed 20% affordable accommodation does not meet with what our council policy usually is. There's no doubt that the height of the development is inappropriate in this so close residential area, which will, of course, also reduce the daylight. The application does not meet the planning requirements that a development should enhance and improve the neighbourhood. On the contrary, this development will have a significant impact on the quality of life for those residents who live in such close proximity. With regard to the landmark icon tree, it reduces traffic pollution and improves air quality for visitors to the adjacent hospital and Waitrose and local residents. Finally, I would like to refer to the extremely detailed and compelling representations from the two ward councillors. I do understand really, and I appreciate the drive to build more accommodation, which we do certainly need in this city, but not at any price. We do have a responsibility to support the local residents we were elected to represent. And this partly applies to the elderly residents who live in the council properties that we have provided in this residential neighbourhood. Although I do not agree with the recommendations, I would like to congratulate Debbie on the work that she had done on this extremely controversial application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Branston. Next speaker, Councillor Henson, and then Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. I go back because one of the ward councillors did mention the sunlight, and I do, that's one of the things that is quite obvious to me in Sanford Walk, particularly on the properties. The gardens are not very big anyway, and to have sunlight in it for just a few hours, this is, to me, is ridiculous. And the height of the building is much that's going to have a problem here. Now, I think it was Councillor Branston who was talking about the building students on Hevertree Road that looked out of sync with what you were looking at in the distance. Now, we all know Hevertree Road is going downhill if you're going towards Exeter anyway, so that would give that illusion of the roofs being the same. But when you come up against it, it is the Sanford Walk area, and somebody mentioned about Newtown is a village. It always has been a village, but now the older families are moving on and the students and younger people are coming in. But we have to look at this as what it's. If you leave that building as the height it is, or too high, that gives the excuse for the developers, who we all know is going to the police building is going to be developed in the future, because that has been on the cards for the last decade. So that's going to allow that building to go even higher. And I feel that we have to, make a decision. We either have to have high buildings or decent buildings that surround the area, that complement the area, and do not knock out people's light and airspace, which is going to be hit on the left-hand side of Sanford Walk. And I think it's so important, though the design looks very, I'm not against the design itself, but I think we've got a floor and a half too high. And I think it has to be addressed, and it's got to stop, because I feel that the developers are putting on, it's like everything else. If you put 8 floors on, they'll come back to the 5 they want to get to. So I think this is what is happening, and I think it's got to stop. And we are the ones who make the decision. The officers might think and agree amongst themselves that this is a nice thing. And as the councillor said, they do not live there. There is people that live there, families that live there, which is their homes. And those homes should be wanting to be lived in. And I think we are the ones who make the decision. And I'm afraid I cannot support this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Henson. It's Chair, Councillor Henson. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat everything that's been said already and keep it brief, but I'm afraid I won't be able to support this because of everything that's been said about the residents in Sanford Walk and St Matthew's Close. From the front of this building, I really appreciate the design work that's gone in, and I think it actually looks quite nice from the front, and and is really acceptable, but it's for the people that are living around the other side of it that are going to have this building far too close to them. 17 metres is far too close, and just having frosted windows may help with the perception of privacy, but to actually have that building sort of appear in the small courtyard backspace that you've got already will be very imposing. So I'm afraid I can't support it in its present form. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Bialik.
Well, thank you, Chair. And clearly, we're rewriting the reasons and the method on which we make planning decisions in this council. We no longer look at the guidance. We no longer listen to the officers. It's how we, and this is I'm the second person to use the word, how we would like our utopian view of life to be. Look, the debate's still going, and I can still be convinced on the building itself. But people are choosing, and I know it's gone past tea time, choosing to cook a few red herrings here at the moment about co-living. 20% housing. Okay, what we haven't asked the officer is, what would have been the building credit to be set against the 35% if this was a normal development? And I reckon that would bring that number of 35% cascading down nearer the 20%. That's an issue. The other thing is, we've got to look at what the work has been done. What was there before, how the engagement is being. But of course, I can understand the developers. They come to a stage is no matter what they say, nobody is going to accept what's going in there. This utopian view that you're going to get some nice boulevards with nice 2-3 bedrooms and some social housing here, and that's maybe in Pinhoe, maybe in Alphington, maybe in Exwick, but not in the city centre. It is a city centre area, and we need to adjust our buildings for it, in my view. So to vote this away, and of which, if that is the case, I can live with that, what will go in its place? Who is going to come back with what? They are not going to come back to us and say, okay, guys, here's a piece of paper, draw your utopian goal. I feel they will end up taking us to an appeal. This site would have most probably been seen for purpose-built student accommodation, of which we've got a policy for. So what are we trading that against? We're trading that against at least 20% social housing, accommodation for people and young people. And we all know that graduates have a problem. We all assume that everybody now wishes to socialise, and this lovely view of everyone washing their car on a Sunday morning, cutting the grass, whilst the partner cooks the Sunday roast. That is not necessarily the way people choose to live nowadays. City centre, urban living is a different lifestyle. I think the Belmont Park has done very well to get 50k out of them. Very well indeed. I genuinely believe the majority of these people will want to go into town, COVID permitted. There's going to be a wonderful new leisure centre just down the road for them. It is absolutely sustainable. And if you are a health worker or any other worker of key services in this city, you may welcome the opportunity. And we should not discount the number of people who now live, well, peripatetically. They don't necessarily live in Exeter. They have a home, they choose to work in Exeter. They can't afford to move here. And living in an accommodation such as this is pretty good. And the amenity space for them to socialise, I think, is also good. I said to you on the last occasion, I've been there myself, and it is not a nice place to be. in necessarily a bedsit or sharing a house at people at certain ages. And I do not accept that the people who would be attracted to this will necessarily be partying every night of the week and causing a nuisance to all the elderly people along Sanford Walk. This is all scare tactics, if you don't mind me saying. We have to have different accommodation for people. Yes, I am quite passionate about it. The building looks a lot better than it was before. I didn't particularly like it. I think it's much better. I think if we were to refuse this, we are going to be in some difficulty in what may come. It won't be a cheer and we're going to get what we want. I do not believe it at all. And I'll leave another councillor to talk about Ash Dieback and the implications of that, because I've learned some stuff about that today. So I need to hear conversation now about why that building is not acceptable and not arguments about fear of who's going to live in it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bianic. Councillor Fowle.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly as a Labour group, I feel we've made a commitment to co-living accommodation as opposed to student-only accommodation. The recent housing survey has confirmed what the company's own survey found in identifying a need for young professionals to be able to access good quality accommodation. There's no doubt there's a great number of young people who work at the RD&E, a great number of young people who are recent graduates who'd like to stay. A lot of people are having to go back home to live with mum and dad because they can't find accommodation. I think this is a golden opportunity to address these issues, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Fowle. Next, I've got Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank all the contributors for their comments, because it's really added to the debate. But I think one thing that's become clear to me, that there's quite a lot of fear of the unknown, because we haven't got co-living at the moment. We don't know what it's like, and a lot of people are assuming. So we've had people saying it's going to be student accommodation. We don't know that. Why should it be student accommodation? We know we're desperately short of accommodation, desperately short for young professionals. So we need the rooms, we need the space for those supermarket key workers, for those hospital staff, and this is ideally located. The other thing that we've had conversations about this evening, not on this application, but it was about the issues of building on green space, on the fields. And so what we're faced with is, do we actually build on more green space and keep to, you know, 1 or 2 story accommodation, or do we build up? We've got to start considering building upwards, because, and this is what we're doing here, so that we've got something that's sustainable, that people can live in and walk to their place of work or use public transport, so they're not going to be using cars. So it meets our green agenda. There are so many positives about this proposed development that I will be supporting it. And I think, you know, a couple of other positives. We are going to have 20% affordable accommodation, which we need for key workers, and we are going to have 5% of it for wheelchair accessible. That is fantastic as well. So I think it is actually expanding the type of community that's going to be Newtown, and that's what we need. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. Councillor Bialik gave me an introduction and an opportunity to talk about Ash Dieback, and I'm not going to talk about it for very long, but there's a 99% chance that tree's got to go. Right? People said small. Well, it's 1% chance that it's going to be good enough to stay. That is what the current science is telling us. So I think that's a bit of a red herring. The second thing is, it's a bit of a principle of mine, but life's full of change. And the housing market is currently in a huge state of flux at the moment. And I don't know if many of you know, but estate agents currently won't let people go and look at houses unless they've got an agreed sale at least agreed on their own property, i.e. they're stopping people doing fanciful viewings and looking at things. Seems to me that if you want to sell your own property, you don't want a bridging loan, but to go into somewhere where just maybe as a couple you can rent for 3 months is something that helps and oils the wheels of the housing market. So it may well be that this development was not designed to do that, but it may well be that this development provides another element to go into the housing market, which makes it easier and oils the wheels, which makes it easier and the whole thing can move quickly and more easily. As Councillor Williams said, we just have to grow up and understand that if you don't want to build on green grass, you've got to build on brown fields and you've got to go upwards. There simply is no other alternative. And as Councillor Bialik says, I'm not entirely sure that what our grounds would be. I wouldn't really want to be Roger Clockworthy defending this at appeal if we turned it down. I think that would be a very difficult place to be, and I would have a great deal of sympathy with him if he had to do that. So there we go. I think there are some different reasons for accepting this and voting for this, and I certainly shall be. Thank you.
Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some of the points have been covered by others. I look at the design of this and there are things that I wish were different. I in an ideal world that Councillor Bialik's talked about, I would like it to be perhaps a story smaller and possibly without the wings on the back. But we have to determine this application because this is the one that's actually been submitted to us. And I'm in complete agreement about the use of brownfield sites. People talk about having terraced houses for families, but had the proposal come in as terraced house for families, that would also be families who are car owners, and there would be increased pressure on residents parking in the nearby streets, and no doubt we'd have people telling us that we couldn't have that sort of housing because there wasn't enough parking space. This is a car-free development that has been said. It's on bus routes going both into town if you're not able to walk or it's pouring with rain, and going out of town if you happen to work in one of the areas on the outskirts of the city. And there are all kinds of people who frankly are not in the kind of time of their life and the place where certainly people like me are, where we've accumulated a lot of stuff over the years, and some of us are trying to get rid of it and declutter. And I said this last time we talked about co-living, but I had a time in my life where I lived in bedsits, and most of them were pretty grotty, and most of them probably weren't much bigger and possibly even smaller than the rooms that we're looking at here. And I kind of moved without much of a care, really, because I didn't have that much stuff to cart around. And I changed jobs quite frequently. And there will be people working at the hospital on short-term contracts who want to come in and want somewhere that's high quality accommodation for a short period of time in their lives, and actually won't mind the fact that they can't bring a car because they haven't got one, and there isn't a garden because they don't want one. So I think we have, as other people have said, got to move with the times, got to give this a chance, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you. That's all the people I've seen indicate that they wanted to speak. So if someone wants to move the recommendation and second it, we'll move on to the vote.
Apologies, Chair. Just to confirm with Debbie, was there an amendment to that recommendation in the report?
There was.
Yes, there was an amendment, and I did just want to have the opportunity to come back to talk about essential local workers and the definition within the National Planning Policy Framework. So the definition for essential local workers is public sector employees who provide frontline services in areas including health, education and community safety, such as NHS staff, teachers, police, firefighters and military personnel, social care and child care workers. If members wanted to, they could extend that definition to include retail workers as well. And then the recommendation, I would seek delegated authority to agree the detailed wording of the conditions with the chair, and that is just to make minor changes to the wording of the conditions on the update sheet, as I'm discussing the detailed wording with the developer at the moment, and just agreeing the pre-commencement conditions, which we are required to do.
Okay, back to my previous point. Would anybody like to move the recommendation, and would anyone like to second? I've got Councillor Williams moving it.
Chair, could I just check because I would like to recommend that we take Deborah's wider definition of key worker to include the retail sector, because as we've seen in the recent COVID and the lockdown, those workers have been absolutely key.
Okay, would someone like to move that recommendation and then second? Thank you, and then can we take a vote on that, Mark, please?
Yep. So could I just have for those Councillor Barlick seconding? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, all Councillor Sparks, it's okay.
Oh, thank you. So starting alphabetical, Councillor Bialik, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Branston.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Fole.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Gussain.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaford.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Henson.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
4 the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Sparks.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Sutton.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Morse.
4.
That's a unanimous on the amendment, Chair.
And as that's been added to the substantive recommendation, can I get someone to recommend that or move that and second it? Sorry, getting on. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Moved it. Someone to second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Bialik.
No.
And Mark, can we take that to the vote as well, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bialik, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Branston.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Fole.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Gussain. Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Councillor Gussain.
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you. Councillor Hannaford.
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Henson.
Against.
That one. Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Sparks.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Sutton.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Morse.
4.
Thank you. I'll just count that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 4, 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13. So that's 7 votes in favour, 4 against, with 2 abstentions. So the recommendations have been carried as amended, Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving on. Agenda item number 8, sorry, the list of delegated decisions. Can I ask Roger Clotworthy to present the list, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I haven't been notified of any questions from members, so I'm just would like members to note the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And item number 9, which is appeals, and that's the last item of business tonight. Roger, would you like to present the report?
Yes, thank you. There are 5 decisions that are summarised in the report, 4 of which the appeals were dismissed and 1 which was allowed. If councillors have any questions, then please contact me. Otherwise, it's just there to note, also to note that there are 2 new appeals being received.
Thank you, Roger. That brings to an end the evening's proceedings, and I'm about to formally close the meeting. I would like to thank you all, officers and members, for your good nature during some heated debate. Go home, stay home, enjoy yourself, stay safe, and we'll see you all again soon.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.